The story begins on a bright sunny day in the middle of a lively town. Merchants are busy calling out to customers, people fill the streets, and the marketplace is overflowing with activity. Right in the center of the town stands a young woman holding a smartphone in her hand with a completely bewildered expression. She thinks that she is supposed to be nothing more than an ordinary college student. Memories immediately flash through her mind of several strangers yelling at her. One man had shouted at her to get lost if she did not have any money, while another woman had coldly declared that her establishment did not accept hobos. Remembering all of that, she wonders how her life somehow ended up like this. While she is still frozen in confusion, a cheerful voice suddenly comes from inside her phone. "Master! Master! Over here!" She stares at the phone with widened eyes, completely stunned, and wonders what in the world is happening. The story then shifts back several hours earlier. While she is attending college classes, a notification suddenly appears on her phone. "Master, the diamond card is full. Please empty the card." At almost the same moment, her phone rings loudly inside the classroom. Every student immediately turns around to look at her. Feeling embarrassed, she realizes that she forgot to put her phone on silent mode before class. The classmate sitting beside her glances at the screen and cannot help making fun of her. She asks why she is still playing such a trash game and wonders what could possibly be entertaining about spending an entire day mining diamonds. The young woman simply replies by asking why her friend cares whether she still plays it or not. She then thinks to herself that the game her friend keeps insulting is Infinitia, a simple clicker game with practically no story and almost no world building. The entire gameplay consists of repeatedly tapping the screen while tiny miner gnomes automatically gather diamonds. It is repetitive, simple, and honestly quite boring to most people. Her friend reminds her that she has been playing the exact same game every single day for an entire year. She asks whether she never gets bored and jokingly calls her a complete weirdo. Instead of feeling offended, the young woman proudly lifts her phone and explains that there is only one reason she has remained so dedicated all this time. There is a secret achievement that can only be unlocked after collecting a very specific amount of diamonds, and despite the game's age, not a single player has managed to obtain it yet. She explains that she has emptied her diamond carts every single day for an entire year just to reach that milestone. In her opinion, once someone starts something, they should see it through until the very end. Her friend only looks at her with disbelief, silently thinking that she is unbelievably cringe. Trying to change the subject, the friend excitedly recommends another game called Terrarium Adventure. She explains that pre-registration has already opened and that the game will officially launch next month. Without waiting for permission, she even grabs the young woman's phone and begins registering for her. While looking at the game's page, the young woman suddenly notices something important. She realizes that Terrarium Adventure is developed by the same company that created Infinite Diameter. That immediately makes her uneasy. She wonders whether the developers are preparing to shut down Infinite Dia once the new game launches. After all, there is no reason for a company to continue spending money on servers for a game that barely earns any profit anymore. A little while later, classes end, and she boards a bus. As she sits by the window, she thinks that she even skipped the rest of her classes for the day simply to finish obtaining the achievement before it is too late. She reasons that countless online games announce server closures roughly a year after launch whenever they stop making money. She absolutely refuses to let that happen before she earns the achievement she has spent an entire year chasing. Although she dislikes gacha games, she cannot deny that Terrarium Adventure looks visually incredible. She jokes to herself that the developers seem completely determined to squeeze as much money from players as possible. Opening Infinite Deal once again, she calculates that she only needs to empty the fully loaded diamond cart 2 more times. However, another worrying thought crosses her mind. What if the servers shut down before she reaches the required amount? For this reason, she decides there is only one option left: pay to win. She laughs at herself, thinking that spending real money on a game that is practically dead is incredibly stupid. Nevertheless, after considering everything carefully, she purchases every available mining buff. Immediately afterward, the tiny miner gnomes begin working at unbelievable speed. Watching the screen with satisfaction, she thinks that they are finally mining like crazy. She decides that she is simply going to stare at her phone for the rest of the day until the achievement unlocks. Eventually, she returns home. Not long after entering the house, her phone vibrates again. Thinking the cart must already be full, she eagerly reaches for it. Instead, she discovers a text message confirming her pre-registration for Terrarium Adventure. The message welcomes Ms. Druid and thanks her for registering. Reading it, she suddenly realizes that she somehow turned silent mode off without even noticing. Just then, another notification finally appears. Master, the diamond cart is full. Please empty the cart. Her eyes immediately light up with excitement. She realizes this is the final cart she needs to empty in order to unlock the secret achievement she has chased for an entire year. Without wasting even a second, she taps the confirmation button. Feeling extremely confident, she smugly thinks that every other player is too late. The progress bar slowly reaches 100% before an enormous pile of diamonds pours into her vault. The total finally reaches the exact hidden requirement. She excitedly celebrates, realizing she has finally achieved the impossible after an entire year of non-stop dedication. Unable to contain her happiness, she immediately begins taking screenshots to preserve the moment forever. A brand new notification suddenly appears. Congratulations! You obtained the secret achievement. Her curiosity instantly reaches its peak. She hurriedly taps the reward screen, wondering what kind of incredible prize could possibly require an entire year's worth of effort. A treasure chest slowly opens. Inside rests a single glowing key. Another notification appears. You obtained the mystical key. She stares blankly at the reward. After waiting for so long, all she receives is a key. She cannot even take a screenshot of it. Confused, she repeatedly presses the screenshot buttons, wondering whether her phone has suddenly broken. At that exact moment, her phone's brightness begins increasing on its own. She watches in disbelief as the light grows brighter and brighter. Soon the screen becomes so radiant that it completely illuminates her entire house. Panicking, she wonders how a simple smartphone could possibly produce so much light. The brightness continues increasing until she can no longer keep her eyes open. By the time the blinding light finally disappears, she is no longer standing inside her house. Instead, she suddenly finds herself standing in the middle of an unfamiliar town. Completely speechless, she realizes that only moments ago she had been standing inside her home's entrance. She has absolutely no idea how she ended up somewhere completely different. Looking around, she notices there are no skyscrapers anywhere in sight. The architecture resembles something straight out of a fantasy world. She even wonders whether she is somehow still in Seoul. Trying to stay calm, she quickly grabs her phone. She figures that checking the GPS should immediately reveal her location. However, when she presses the power button, nothing happens. Her phone is completely dead. Before she can think any further, a nearby shopkeeper notices her lingering outside. He impatiently tells her that if she is not a customer, she should stop blocking his business and get lost before roughly pushing her aside. She walks away while thinking that he has an unbelievably terrible personality. Unfortunately, things only become worse. Another woman notices her wandering aimlessly and harshly tells her that her inn does not accept hobos before warning her not to scare away paying customers. Elsewhere, another merchant asks whether she honestly expects to rent a room while looking like that before slamming the door directly in her face. Feeling completely bewildered, she apologizes in her thoughts for accidentally standing in people's way, yet she cannot understand why everyone keeps treating her like she is homeless. Eventually, she passes a mirror. Planning to reassure herself, she glances at her reflection. Instead, she screams. Her modern jacket has completely disappeared. She is now wearing an unfamiliar robe unlike anything she owns. Even more shocking, her hair has somehow become bright purple. She frantically examines herself before looking around at everyone else. She notices people with brightly colored hair, green skin, unusual races, and appearances that look as though they stepped directly out of a fantasy role-playing game. Completely overwhelmed, she wonders whether her brain has finally broken along with her phone. The atmosphere feels exactly like an RPG world. As she continues walking, merchants loudly advertise their products. One proudly announces low-grade stones for 10 diamonds. Another advertises crafting patterns for only 3 diamonds. Someone else enthusiastically sells homemade potions for 5 diamonds each, claiming they are even cheaper than those produced by the Alchemist Tower. Hearing the constant mention of diamonds leaves her completely stunned. She wonders whether she has become so obsessed with infinite ya that she is now hallucinating its terminology everywhere she goes. Just then, the mysterious voice suddenly speaks again. Master. She immediately freezes. Looking around in every direction, she cannot find anyone speaking to her. Her heartbeat quickens. The voice calls once more. Master, do you need diamonds? Over here! This time she realizes the voice is coming from her phone. Completely startled, She nervously raises the dead smartphone and jokingly asks whether it has somehow turned into Siri. To her absolute disbelief, the black screen suddenly lights up by itself. 3 familiar minor characters from Infinite Dia appear on the screen, happily waving at her. Her eyes grow wider than ever before. She stares at the tiny characters in complete disbelief and wonders why the characters from Infinite Dia are suddenly inside her phone. And more importantly, why they are talking to her. Before she can process that impossible sight, even more little characters begin popping onto the screen one after another, each enthusiastically greeting their new master. Druid continues standing inside the unfamiliar fantasy-like town, still surrounded by confusion and an ever-changing reality she cannot fully comprehend. From inside her phone, the 2 familiar minor sprites from Infinite Dia continue calling out to her. Master. Master. She pauses, suddenly realizing why that word has been echoing in her ears ever since she arrived. It is the exact same word the minor sprites always use in the game. Lowering her gaze to the phone, she questions why Infinite Dia has appeared in this world at all. At first, she assumes it is nothing more than a glitch or hallucination. However, she quickly notices something far more unsettling. The characters inside the screen are not merely displaying dialogue. They are actively responding to her presence, staring directly at her as though they can see her through the device. A chill runs down her spine. One of the miners calmly informs her that if she needs diamonds, a large quantity is already stored in the cart. The other immediately adds that plenty more are kept inside the underground warehouse. The first continues by explaining that the foundation layer is filled with diamonds instead of gravel and insists that all of them belong to her. The second eagerly asks whether she wants them dug out with a shovel, then immediately suggests carrying them out with a bucket instead. The 2 continue enthusiastically offering increasingly absurd ways of delivering diamonds. Druid gradually becomes irritated. She angrily thinks that these mere sprites behave as though she is supposed to solve everything by relying on infinite in-game resources. She wonders what they expect her to do with countless diamonds in reality. Rather than answering any of her actual questions, they remain obsessed with repeatedly calling her master while insisting she take more diamonds. Unable to tolerate it any longer, she demands an explanation, asking what they even mean by giving her diamonds and how any of it is supposed to help her current situation. One minor matter-of-factly explains that they are her wallet. The other immediately adds that if she wishes to go on an adventure, she will naturally require a large amount of diamonds. Together, they calmly insist that every problem can be solved with diamonds. Druid becomes even more frustrated. She thinks this world is nothing like a game where every obstacle can be overcome with a single currency. Before continuing her argument, however, she suddenly realizes something important. She sharply asks whether they even know where she is. For a brief moment, both sprites fall silent, whispering among themselves inside the screen as though trying to process the question. Eventually, one of them admits that they do not understand what she means, explaining that they are simply her loyal wallet and urging her to use diamonds to solve her problems. Druid feels completely exasperated. She thinks the world certainly does not function like Infinite Dia, where every issue can be solved through currency alone. Even so, she forces herself to remain calm and instead asks how she can obtain even more diamonds. Before either miner can respond, a nearby voice suddenly interrupts. "Excuse me." Druid flinches and immediately turns around. A small girl stands behind her, looking up at her curiously. For some reason, Druid feels slightly relieved. At the very least, this person appears far more normal and trustworthy than the voices coming from her phone. The girl politely asks whether Druid is a customer looking for something. After hesitating briefly, Druid asks if anything other than bread can be accepted since she has nothing else to offer. The girl calmly replies that even a cup of clean water would be acceptable because every water source in town has gradually dried up due to environmental conditions outside the settlement. Druid quickly interrupts, admitting that she has neither bread nor water. Only then does she realize that she possesses absolutely nothing she can exchange for money. After a short pause, she slowly raises her phone and mutters that the only thing she has is the strange device itself. At that exact moment, diamonds suddenly begin pouring out of the phone once again. She gasps in shock. The girl freezes as well. Looking at the scattered diamonds covering the ground, Druid wonders where they are even coming from. There is no possible way her phone should possess such a function. The girl nervously asks what exactly is happening. Druid hurriedly apologizes before holding up one of the diamonds and asking whether something like it can be accepted instead. The girl's eyes widen instantly. She stammers that the amount is far too valuable for her to accept and explains that even a tiny fraction would already be overwhelming. Only then does Druid slowly realize that these diamonds are not merely decorative items. They possess tremendous value and can actually function as currency within this world. Because of that realization, she concludes that the entire situation has completely changed. She carefully hands several diamonds to the girl and politely asks for help in return. Still shocked by their value, the girl admits that even if she genuinely wants to help, she lacks the ability to protect Druid or offer anything beyond simple assistance. Sometime later, beneath the warm sunlight, the girl happily eats a simple bun while Druid carries a small bag of bread she has obtained in exchange for only a few diamonds. The girl then explains that it is her first time meeting Druid and mentions that the town is sustained by a branch connected to the world tree, allowing its surroundings to remain relatively stable and full of life. Druid listens carefully, although she remains internally confused by unfamiliar terms such as the world tree. For now, she decides not to ask too many questions. Watching the girl eat so eagerly makes Druid feel slightly emotional. Earlier, she manages to buy a small amount of food using only a single diamond, which already shows her how absurdly valuable the stones are in this world. She also notices that even ordinary food portions are so large they barely fit inside her pocket, making everything around her feel strangely unreal. Eventually, they arrive at a building that looks very much like an inn. Inside, a man warmly welcomes them. As Druid looks around, she immediately recognizes the interior as resembling the classic inns often found in fantasy RPGs. The man greets the girl warmly, remarking that it has been quite some time since she last visited and noting with interest that she has brought a guest along. Quietly observing the conversation, Druid finally learns that the girl's name is Daisy. After a brief exchange, Daisy politely bows and prepares to leave, thanking Druid for the food while wishing her well. Suddenly, Druid stops her and asks whether she would consider working for her. Daisy looks confused, admitting that she is uncertain whether she can be of any help since she possesses no special abilities and cannot even protect Druid properly. Druid immediately becomes emotional again, insisting that Daisy is the only person capable of helping her. Internally, she reasons that she cannot simply approach random strangers in town and begin asking complicated questions without someone trustworthy to guide her. Growing nervous, Daisy quietly wonders whether someone as powerless as herself can truly be useful. Druid immediately realizes how suspicious her request must sound and internally admits that it resembles something closer to kidnapping than employment. She quickly corrects herself, thanking Daisy once again for guiding her safely to the inn. She explains that she only asks because she knows absolutely nothing about the town, while Daisy seems familiar with it. Instead, she suggests that they simply continue talking over a meal inside the inn. Daisy happily agrees. Druid sighs in relief, thinking that the atmosphere seems safe enough since the inn's ground floor remains open and Daisy clearly knows the owner well. Just as she is about to sit down, she suddenly remembers the remaining diamonds. She wonders whether they will actually be enough to pay for a meal considering the strangely inflated value of everything in this world. After hesitating for a moment, she slowly raises her phone again. Then a thought crosses her mind. She gently shakes it. Once again, diamonds begin pouring out endlessly. Her eyes widen in complete disbelief. Inside the phone, the two minor sprites excitedly urge her to take more, insisting that it still will not be enough. They encourage her to buy clothes, purchase weapons, hire mercenaries, secure a place to stay, and keep taking more diamonds. Druid remains completely frozen, silently staring at the overflowing pile of diamonds as she slowly realizes that everything happening around her is genuinely connected to Infinite Ya in a way she never imagines possible. The scene continues inside a small inn where warm food is placed across the wooden table. Druid observes the dishes and thinks that after drinking milk and eating bread earlier, she still feels there is space for more. For this reason, the sight of properly cooked food feels slightly overwhelming in a good way. At the same time, she notices Daisy's eyes sparkling, but Daisy does not reach for any food. Druid tilts her head in confusion and wonders inwardly why Daisy keeps staring instead of eating. For this reason, she gently urges her to eat, saying that she should dig in. Daisy reacts in surprise and hesitates, asking whether it is really fine since Ms. Druid, who brought the meal, has not even touched her portion. She adds that someone like Druid seems too noble-like to simply eat carelessly. Druid thinks to herself that Daisy is being far too polite, almost like she is treating her as a high-ranking noble rather than a stranger she just met. For this reason, She responds that she is not actually that hungry and then awkwardly asks why Daisy keeps calling her Druid. Daisy explains her assumption, stating that since Druid arrived in this town and mentioned going on an adventure, it is obvious she must be a traveler-type figure. She also adds that most people avoid traveling because the fire phenomenon outside the towns is dangerous, and furthermore this is the season when the branch of the world tree bears fruit, so outsiders are usually rare. Druid immediately corrects her, insisting she is indeed a druid, while internally panicking and thinking that she does not fully understand the situation but feels uncomfortable letting a child treat her with such cautious respect. For this reason, she leans closer and lowers her voice, revealing a fabricated explanation that she is extremely wealthy in the game Infinite Ya and has been living off accumulated diamonds, so she has no proper understanding of common currency or normal society. Daisy's eyes widen in shock at this confession. Druid continues, explaining that for this reason she might easily be cheated by strangers, and therefore she wants Daisy's help to understand this world properly. She even exaggerates emotionally, worrying aloud that if she asks someone else, they might be dangerous and steal her diamonds. Daisy immediately reassures her, raising her voice slightly in concern and saying that such a situation would be terrible. Druid then adds that she does not want to be a burden or annoy Daisy, which is why she is acting politely. Daisy quickly denies being annoyed and explains she is simply sharing what she knows. Druid observes Daisy's expression and thinks that she now looks more relaxed, although there is a subtle change in sympathy in her gaze. For this reason, Druid concludes that showing her diamond situation earlier is actually working in her favor. Druid encourages Daisy to eat properly, saying she should replenish her energy since she will need to talk a lot. Daisy smiles and agrees, promising she will eat well and help Ms. Druid as much as she can. While Daisy eats, Druid watches her and thinks that she eats heartily and honestly, focusing on the meat in a simple and sincere way, which oddly makes Druid feel comforted. Daisy then invites Druid to ask anything, promising to answer everything she knows. Druid, after deliberately choosing a corner seat for safety, thinks she still lacks basic knowledge of what is common sense in this world. For this reason, she decides to begin with the simplest possible question. She asks the name of the place. Daisy replies that it is the 26th terrarium of the World Tree, and explains that sometimes outsiders misunderstand the numbering. Druid freezes mentally and thinks that such a name would be extremely strange for any normal country, further increasing her suspicion that she is not in Seoul or any familiar place. She then asks about the meaning of the number. Daisy explains that the number represents the branch of the World Tree that influences the region, and that smaller numbers are closer to the World Tree while larger ones are farther away. She adds that this region is relatively close, so its environment is directly affected by the World Tree's power, and for this reason fire attacks outside the town are less severe, but stepping outside the town leads to immediate danger from fire phenomena. Druid internally panics and thinks she does not understand what World Tree or fire attacks are supposed to mean, yet she forces herself to praise Daisy, saying she is very knowledgeable. Daisy becomes happy and encourages her to ask more questions anytime. Druid feels slightly relieved, thinking Daisy is finally more comfortable. However, before she can continue questioning, the inn door suddenly opens loudly. A man enters in frustration, complaining that he needs an early place to stay but only found remote inns like this one. He then notices Daisy and Druid sitting together and immediately reacts with hostility. He insults Daisy's red hair, calling it unlucky, and demands they leave. Druid is stunned and thinks his attitude is completely unreasonable, especially since she was just starting to relax. For this reason, she stands up angrily and challenges him verbally. The man becomes more aggressive and tries to grab Daisy, but the inn owner intervenes instantly, grabbing him and throwing him to the floor while ordering him to leave if he intends to cause trouble. The man protests loudly, claiming he is an important person and that only dryads can stop the fire phenomenon, which his group supposedly controls. He boasts that towns affected by fire are being destroyed and implies he could be a savior if given influence. Druid listens carefully and thinks the term dryad sounds like some kind of key entity in controlling fire. For this reason, she starts suspecting that this world treats fire as a living or monster-like force rather than a natural disaster. The inn owner rejects his claims, saying business will continue normally and anyone causing disturbance will be thrown out. The man angrily leaves, threatening that the town will regret it. After he leaves, Druid tells Daisy not to worry about him. Daisy still looks uneasy, but Druid stands and requests a glass of water from the staff. The inn owner apologizes, explaining that water is currently scarce due to fire-related environmental damage, and even bottled water costs extra. Druid recalls Daisy's earlier explanation about dried water sources and fire effects and, despite the high price, still purchases the water. She hands it to Daisy and tells her to drink. Daisy is shocked and says she has never been treated like this even by town workers, but Druid insists it is fine since Daisy is helping her a lot. Daisy finally accepts and drinks, visibly moved. Druid then reflects that although the earlier man was unpleasant, Daisy's explanation about dryads suggests they are extremely important in controlling fire phenomena in this world. At that moment, she suddenly realizes something familiar in the terminology Druid and Terrarium, recalling the game Terrarium Adventure, which her friend had urged her to pre-register for. She remembers the confirmation message she ignored earlier and connects it to what Daisy said about the World Tree system. For this reason, she wonders whether she might actually be inside that game world. She slowly raises her phone and checks it, thinking it is impossible for this to be real, since such systems should not exist outside games. She concludes that Terrarium Adventure is still an unreleased mobile game. Daisy looks at the phone in confusion and calls it a wallet. Druid freezes, then internally panics and thinks she is completely doomed. Outwardly, she agrees awkwardly, saying yes it is a wallet, and asks if Daisy has one too. Daisy replies that she does not have enough diamonds to need one. Druid, overwhelmed by the situation, slams her head onto the table in frustration while Daisy looks surprised. In her mind, Druid realizes that normally in an unknown world she should be panicking about returning home, but instead she is becoming increasingly curious. For this reason, she begins wondering whether she could level up or progress here like in a game system, as her sense of reality continues to blur. Druid's curiosity continues growing stronger the more she thinks about her current situation. Instead of worrying only about surviving, her gamer instincts begin taking over. She wonders what the ultimate objective of this world could possibly be. In her mind, she excitedly imagines all kinds of game mechanics, wondering whether there is an achievement system, party formations, dungeon exploration, or even powerful bosses waiting to be defeated. She even wonders if she can learn special skills herself. The thought alone fills her with excitement, and she eagerly asks herself what she should accomplish first in order to put out the mysterious fire. Before she can continue her train of thought, Daisy gently interrupts her. Daisy says that she understands Druid must be feeling nervous now that she has finally begun her adventure. However, she explains that this is the fate every Druid eventually faces. She continues by saying that she has always admired the noble hearts of Druids and sincerely roots for every one of them. Hearing those encouraging words causes Druid's eyes to sparkle. She absent-mindedly repeats the word rooting before suddenly realizing how excited she has been acting. She immediately thinks to herself that she must have looked completely insane after getting carried away by fantasies about game systems. Embarrassed, she clears her throat and awkwardly admits that Daisy is right and that she really is feeling a little frightened. Daisy nods sympathetically and explains that anyone would be scared. She says the fire is truly terrifying and quietly reveals that many children in the village have lost their parents because of it. She adds that she herself becomes an orphan for that very reason. Druid freezes after hearing those words. Until this moment, she has been treating everything like the beginning of a fantasy game, but Daisy's confession suddenly reminds her that real lives are involved. She thinks that a painfully serious topic has appeared completely out of nowhere. Feeling guilty, she apologizes to Daisy. However, Daisy gently smiles and assures her that there is nothing for her to apologize for. Wanting to know more, Druid asks where Daisy currently lives. Daisy calmly explains that she sleeps in the nearby community center, where the doors are always open to orphan children like herself. Listening to this makes Druid reflect on her own world. She thinks that firefighters are also respected heroes back home, and perhaps dryads fulfill a similar role in this world. For this reason, she becomes curious and asks Daisy why only dryads are capable of stopping the fire, clarifying that she is asking purely out of curiosity. Daisy explains that it is probably because dryads are born from the world tree itself. Ordinary plants can resist fire to some extent, but dryads inherit special powers directly from the world tree, allowing them to confront the flames. Druid immediately recalls what the rude man at the inn mentioned earlier about obtaining a dryad. Everything begins making slightly more sense in her gamer mind. She concludes that if this truly is a game world, then this town is probably the beginner area where new players start with almost nothing. Thinking this way immediately reignites her excitement. She eagerly asks Daisy what she needs to do first in order to obtain a dryad. In her imagination, she is already picturing the beautifully designed characters she remembers seeing on the promotional page for Terrarium Adventure. Daisy happily explains that tomorrow morning is important. She says Druid simply needs to wake up early and head to the orchard. Druid blinks in confusion. She repeats the word orchard to herself and immediately imagines rows of apple and pear trees. For a brief moment, she seriously wonders whether this fantasy game is actually some sort of farming simulator. Before she can ask any further questions, the inn owner politely interrupts their conversation. He apologetically explains that the restaurant is closing for the night and the staff needs to begin cleaning. Only then does Druid glance toward the window and realize complete darkness has fallen outside. She mentally panics, wondering when it became so late since she still has countless questions left unanswered. Looking back at Daisy, Druid honestly admits that waking up early is one of her greatest weaknesses. She explains that she is absolutely not a morning person, and if nobody wakes her, she is perfectly capable of sleeping through an entire day. Since tomorrow seems incredibly important, she does not want to miss such a valuable opportunity simply because she oversleeps. For this reason, she hesitantly asks Daisy if she would stay with her until tomorrow as a part-time employee. The inn owner overhears the proposal and looks surprised. He asks whether Druid truly intends to hire a child, suggesting instead that she employ professionals through an agency. Druid shakes her head and explains that she only needs someone to help with simple everyday tasks. Daisy suddenly believes she understands everything. She innocently concludes that Druid must have been raised as a noble lady and therefore requires a personal servant just like characters in fairy tales. Both Druid and the inn owner immediately become visibly embarrassed. Covering her mouth, Daisy suddenly realizes she may have accidentally revealed what Druid intended to keep private. The inn owner awkwardly apologizes for overhearing their conversation, explaining there were very few customers tonight, making it difficult not to hear. Looking at Druid with growing curiosity, he remarks that she appears to be a noble woman and wonders how someone like her ends up in a remote place like this. Druid simply replies that certain circumstances bring her here and leaves the explanation at that. Internally, she reflects that even she finds her own situation unbelievable. However, the one thing she feels certain about is Daisy herself. She thinks Daisy is genuinely kind, and for this reason she feels unexpectedly comfortable around her despite having met only today. The inn owner nods thoughtfully before asking Daisy whether she has properly looked into everything. Confused, Daisy asks what he means. The owner pauses for a moment before dismissing the question, saying it is nothing important. He then turns toward Druid and asks how Daisy is supposed to stay overnight at the inn since additional charges apply. Without hesitation, Daisy offers to sleep outside Druid's room instead. She explains that she can still wake Druid in the morning without occupying a room herself. Druid immediately becomes confused about why they are even discussing this. She confidently declares that she will simply pay for Daisy's room as well. As she speaks, she casually shakes her phone once again. Instantly, a shower of brilliant diamonds pours out onto the floor. Both Daisy and the inn owner freeze completely. Daisy hurriedly protests that Druid should not spend so much money on her. However, after witnessing the impossible sight of endless diamonds falling from the mysterious device, even the inn owner decides it would be better to accept Druid's offer. He gently reminds Daisy that sleeping in the community center means enduring cold nights, cramped conditions, and constant worries about food. For this reason, he encourages her to simply accept Druid's kindness. Although Daisy quickly calculates just how valuable those diamonds are, she still hesitates to accept them. Seeing her reluctance, Druid simply laughs and insists that the diamonds belong to her anyway. She glances toward the infinite dust screen and notices something fascinating. The total number of diamonds has actually decreased according to the amount she removed. She also notices the mining cart filling itself again almost immediately. Looking at the enormous total displayed on the screen, she thinks there is absolutely no way she could ever spend all those diamonds during her entire lifetime. Her imagination immediately begins running wild. She pictures herself as an incredibly wealthy noblewoman surrounded by elegant guards while people admire her endless fortune. Thinking about becoming a millionaire overnight makes her grin uncontrollably. She eagerly shakes the phone again, excitedly imagining herself spending money without restraint. However, this time far more diamonds pour out than she intended. She quickly panics and decides she only wants to withdraw what she actually needs. Almost immediately, the familiar gnomes inside Infinite Dia cheerfully announce that the mining cart is full once again. Later that night, after everything settles down, Druid and Daisy enter their room. Looking around at the comfortable bed, Daisy quietly admits that this is the very first time she has ever slept on such a soft mattress. Druid warmly tells her to relax and sleep comfortably. As soon as Druid lies down herself, exhaustion finally catches up with her. Before falling asleep, Daisy softly thanks her once more. She explains that Druid is the first person who has ever paid her fairly and even gave her more than she expected. Daisy reveals that everyone else always left after using her help simply because she was a powerless child. Even when people treated her unfairly, she could never protest since fear always silenced her. She continues by explaining that without Druid's kindness, tomorrow morning would have begun exactly like every other difficult day. She would wake with sore eyes, rush out before sunrise searching for dew-covered plants just to collect drinking water, and hope the other orphan children had not already taken everything. Looking around the warm room, Daisy quietly admits that everything happening right now feels like a dream. She sincerely hopes she never has to wake up from it. Listening to those heartfelt words causes Druid's conscience to ache. She realizes she originally asked Daisy to stay only for her own convenience. However, somewhere along the way, she genuinely grows attached to the cheerful little girl. Looking at Daisy's innocent smile, Druid silently admits to herself that Daisy has become someone she wants to protect. Daisy happily wishes her good night and promises she will wake her early no matter what. Druid smiles warmly before wishing Daisy good night as well. The following morning arrives beneath a bright, clear sky. Standing outside with her phone still in hand, Druid opens her eyes wide as an enormous building comes into view. The surrounding area is overflowing with people moving busily in every direction, creating an energetic atmosphere filled with excitement and conversation. As she stares at the lively location in amazement, only one thought crosses her mind. She wonders if this bustling place is really the orchard Daisy told her about. The next scene shifts to the entrance of the orchard, and Druid immediately realizes that this place is nothing like what she had imagined. She stares at the enormous grounds filled with countless people and thinks in disbelief that this definitely is not an apple orchard. Instead of peaceful trees and baskets of fruit, the place is overflowing with visitors, adventurers, and spectators. Looking at the endless crowd, she wonders why there are so many people gathered here. The entire area feels less like farmland and more like a famous tourist attraction that everyone wants to visit at least once in their lifetime. Beside her, Daisy looks around with an anxious expression before apologizing. She explains that she had not expected there to be such an enormous crowd and worries that she must have brought Miss Druid too late. Hearing the concern in her voice, Druid calmly reassures her that it is not her fault. She even jokes that she probably would not have been able to wake up any earlier no matter how hard Daisy had tried. However, as she notices the tightly packed crowd moving in every direction, she becomes more worried about Daisy being separated from her than about missing her own chance. Without hesitation, she gently lifts Daisy into her arms so the little girl will not be pushed around by the crowd. Daisy immediately protests, saying that she does not want to become a burden to Miss Druid. However, Druid smiles reassuringly and tells her that everything is fine as long as she stays still. Carrying Daisy through the sea of people, Druid cannot help thinking that she really is adorable. As they continue moving forward, Druid quietly asks whether every person gathered here is a druid. Daisy shakes her head and explains that many of them are simply spectators. Since the world tree only bears fruit once every year, countless people travel long distances just to witness the ceremony even if they have no intention of participating themselves. Still completely unfamiliar with the system, Druid asks where she can receive a participation number. Before Daisy can answer, a staff member politely approaches them and asks whether they need assistance. Druid gladly accepts the help, explaining that she wishes to know where she should go to receive a number. Internally, she admits that she has absolutely no idea how anything works in this world, so the safest option is simply asking someone directly. Unfortunately, the employee informs her that all of the free participation numbers have already been distributed. The answer immediately disappoints Daisy, who nervously asks what they should do now. She explains that if they miss today's ceremony, they will have to wait an entire year until the world tree bears fruit again. Druid's eyes widen. Inside her mind, panic begins setting in. If she cannot participate today, then she cannot begin her adventure. She cannot allow the game to end before it has even properly started. Instead of giving up, she immediately asks whether paid participation numbers are still available. She confidently declares that she is willing to pay with diamonds. Sometime later, thanks to her seemingly endless supply of diamonds, Druid successfully purchases a premium participation pass. Holding the pass in her hand, she cannot help smiling to herself. Having money really does solve a lot of problems. The surrounding crowd watches her with shocked expressions after seeing someone casually purchase entry using diamonds, while Druid simply stares at the white participation slips held by everyone else. She asks the employee what time people had needed to arrive in order to receive those free numbers. The employee politely explains that the World Tree only produces fruit once every year, which means the number of free participation passes is extremely limited. For that very reason, some people arrive as early as 3 days in advance and wait in line just to secure one. Druid is completely dumbfounded. In her mind, she compares the situation to fans camping outside for an idol fansign event. Considering how terrible her own stamina is, she cannot even imagine waiting outside for 3 entire days. She silently praises everyone standing in line, genuinely impressed by their dedication. Soon afterward, the employee opens the gate, allowing Druid to enter the orchard. The moment she steps inside, her eyes immediately drift toward the glowing fruits hanging from the gigantic trees. She quietly wonders whether those really are the legendary fruits of the World Tree. At the same time, she notices that many people are secretly staring at her with judgmental expressions. An uncomfortable atmosphere surrounds the orchard. Druid cannot understand why everyone is acting so strangely, while Daisy admits that this is also her first visit, leaving her equally confused. Druid sighs in relief after realizing that at least she is not the only one who has no idea what is happening. Nearby, conversations continuously fill the air. One participant desperately prays that he at least obtains a rare dryad. Another man bitterly reveals that he sold his own land just to gather enough diamonds for today's ceremony. He says he is not even hoping for a unique or special grade dryad anymore. Anything except a normal one would satisfy him, and if he ends up drawing an ordinary dryad, he plans to simply give it away. Daisy quietly lowers her head after hearing those words. Meanwhile, another excited voice suddenly announces that someone has successfully obtained a unique dryad. Others immediately begin discussing the incredible odds, saying that obtaining more than one unique dryad from the same branch is practically impossible. Another participant curses his terrible luck and wonders whether he should simply give up and try again next year instead. Listening to every conversation around her, Druid gradually begins putting the pieces together. Inside her mind, she realizes that dryads apparently possess different rarity levels such as normal, rare, unique, and perhaps even higher. Despite this place being called an orchard, obtaining a dryad is actually nothing more than drawing a character from a fruit. The realization makes everything click. This is basically a gacha system. Normally she dislikes games that rely heavily on random character pulls. However, this situation is completely different. She currently possesses more diamonds than she could possibly spend. Remembering how she always envied players who could casually spend unlimited amounts on gacha games without worrying about their wallets, she suddenly feels incredibly excited. As she turns toward Daisy, however, she notices that the little girl's hands are trembling. Daisy looks genuinely nervous. Druid immediately assumes that this must simply be Daisy's first time witnessing such a huge event. Wanting to ease her anxiety, she gently tells Daisy that there are certainly a lot of strange people gathered here today before suggesting that they explore the orchard together. She even jokingly offers Daisy one of her diamonds. However, Daisy quickly shakes her head. She warmly smiles before saying that simply being beside Miss Druid is already enough for her. Then, with renewed determination, she encourages Druid to go draw her dryad. Hearing those sincere words, Druid feels deeply moved. She realizes that Daisy has started relying on her. A few moments later, Druid approaches the same employee from whom she purchased the premium pass and politely asks when she is supposed to pay the diamonds. The employee explains that payment happens only after the participant chooses a fruit. The collected diamonds are then used to maintain the orchard itself. Curious, Druid asks how much a single fruit costs. Before the employee can answer, another participant casually replies that each fruit costs 300 diamonds. The number completely shocks her. Inside her mind, she quickly performs the calculation. 300 diamonds are enough to purchase approximately 900 loaves of bread or 600 bottles of milk. Compared to ordinary living expenses, that amount is absurd. Fortunately, she reminds herself that she no longer has to worry about money. Smiling confidently, she suggests that they should simply go choose a fruit. As they approach the trees, another woman nearby carefully inspects several fruits while complaining that one looks too glossy and another has a strange color. Druid stares at every fruit for several seconds. To her, they all look exactly the same. Instead of choosing one herself, she notices Daisy still looking somewhat hesitant. Smiling gently, Druid tells Daisy to choose one on her behalf. The unexpected request completely surprises the little girl. After hesitating for a moment, Daisy slowly points toward one particular fruit. Just as Druid prepares to reach for it, a loud voice suddenly interrupts them. The man from yesterday's inn appears before them. Druid immediately recognizes him as the same superstitious man who had caused trouble earlier. He asks how many fruits she intends to purchase. Completely confused, Druid asks why that matters at all. Internally, she cannot believe she has run into this troublesome person again. The man loudly declares that today's ceremony is incredibly important for him. He explains that he intends to choose a fruit according to his lucky number, and if someone else selects a fruit before him, it will ruin the number he carefully planned. Listening to his explanation, Druid concludes that he is not merely superstitious. He is completely unreasonable. She decides it would be best to avoid arguing with someone like him. However, the man suddenly points directly at her before demanding that she choose her fruit only after he finishes. He even blames her for ruining his plans yesterday and insists that she cooperate with his lucky number strategy. As if that were not enough, he cruelly turns toward Daisy. He begins insulting the little girl's bright red hair, claiming that red is an unlucky color. He orders Daisy to cover her hair or stay away until he finishes drawing his fruit. Daisy's face immediately turns pale with fear. Unable to endure the insults any longer, she apologizes despite having done absolutely nothing wrong. That single apology becomes the final straw. Druid's expression instantly hardens. Anger boils inside her as she remembers how this same man had bullied Daisy the previous day over the exact same ridiculous superstition. Without thinking twice, she steps protectively in front of the frightened girl. Looking directly at the man with blazing eyes, she angrily shouts, "Don't you dare talk to my baby like that, you bastard." Druid's expression immediately hardens with anger. Inside her mind, she thinks that she tolerated this man's ridiculous behavior once already, but she absolutely refuses to tolerate it a second time. She steps forward without the slightest intention of backing down and loudly tells him that he should simply go and pick his own fruit. She points out that blindly believing in meaningless superstitions is not suddenly going to improve his luck. If he is so obsessed with matching a lucky number, then he should simply spend more money and purchase another fruit himself instead of harassing innocent people. The man is left speechless for a moment before angrily shouting whether she even understands how expensive a single fruit actually is. A crowd gradually begins gathering around them after hearing the argument. Druid remains completely calm. She confidently replies that 300 diamonds are only expensive from his point of view. Then she mercilessly adds that there is absolutely no reason everyone else should have to tolerate the arrogant attitude of someone as poor as him. The surrounding spectators immediately begin whispering among themselves. Some wonder whether she truly possesses that much money or whether she is merely bluffing to save face. Others remain skeptical, unable to believe anyone could casually spend such an outrageous amount of diamonds. Listening to their gossip, Druid simply thinks that if everyone wants proof, then she might as well show them. She immediately turns toward Daisy. With a gentle smile, she reminds Daisy that she liked one particular fruit earlier and asks whether it is still the same one. Daisy hesitates for a brief moment before quietly nodding. Without wasting another second, Druid confidently walks over and plucks the exact fruit Daisy had chosen. The moment she touches it, she notices that the fruit feels pleasantly warm in her hands. However, she does not stop there. Instead, she casually reaches out and begins picking even more fruits one after another. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The man who had been arguing with her can only stare with his mouth hanging wide open. Everyone else is equally stunned. Once she finishes selecting 6 fruits altogether, she calmly walks toward the employee who had sold her the premium participation pass and cheerfully announces that she is ready to pay. She then takes out her phone and opens Infinite Deal once again. The familiar gnomes immediately appear on the screen while energetically shouting for their master. This time, instead of ignoring them, Druid gives them a command. She first tells them to scoop up diamonds with a shovel before immediately changing her mind and ordering them to simply pour out the entire cart. The tiny gnomes enthusiastically obey. Druid begins shaking her phone once more. Just like before, countless diamonds start pouring out of the phone as if gravity itself has begun obeying the game. Everyone nearby freezes. The employee collecting payment watches the unbelievable sight with wide eyes. Even the arrogant man who had been insulting Daisy completely loses the ability to speak. Diamond after diamond continues falling until the employee hurriedly counts them. After reaching the required amount, he nervously informs Druid that she has already exceeded the payment by another 158 diamonds. Silence immediately falls over the orchard. Druid simply blinks before casually replying that, in that case, she might as well buy another fruit. Without any concern whatsoever, she shakes her phone again. Another shower of diamonds pours onto the table. Laughing awkwardly, she comments that getting the exact amount is surprisingly difficult since the diamonds simply keep coming out. She cheerfully tells the employee that he can consider the remaining diamonds as a tip. The employee stands there completely speechless. Afterward, Druid turns toward Daisy. The little girl has remained frozen in place this entire time, unable to process what she has just witnessed. Smiling warmly, Druid tells her that she must truly be her lucky charm. She says that she is certain any fruit Daisy chooses will surely bring her good fortune. The rarity honestly does not matter to her anymore, so she asks Daisy to choose one more fruit. Those sincere words deeply touch Daisy. Meanwhile, the superstitious man watches everything unfold with trembling fists. His face twists with frustration and humiliation, but he cannot say a single word. The employee respectfully steps forward before informing Druid that he will now escort her to the greenhouse where the fruits can bloom. Leading the furious man behind, Druid and Daisy quietly follow him. Sometime later, they finally arrive at the enormous greenhouse. The moment Druid steps inside, her eyes sparkle with excitement. She cannot help thinking that the entire place looks absolutely amazing. As she follows the employee deeper inside, she honestly admits to herself that her heart had almost exploded from nervousness when she confronted that rude man earlier. Back then, she had genuinely been terrified. However, now that everything is over, she feels incredibly refreshed. She never imagines that she would someday possess the confidence to stand up to someone like that. Inside her mind, she realizes that having an absurd amount of money naturally gives a person confidence. She silently concludes that money really does rule the world. While smiling to herself, she also jokingly thinks that flexing money feels surprisingly satisfying. Meanwhile, Daisy quietly watches Druid from behind, still amazed by everything that happened. Soon afterward, they stop before several stone platforms where the fruits are supposed to bloom. Looking around with fascination, Druid wonders whether placing the fruits there will really allow dryads to emerge. The employee politely explains that each fruit can first be examined through the nearby stone plate, allowing its genetic information to be checked before blooming. Druid tilts her head in confusion and asks what exactly he means by genetic information. The employee appears slightly surprised before explaining that surely she already knows that the world tree contains the genetic information of every single dryad existing throughout the world. Druid simply nods while secretly thinking that she obviously knows absolutely nothing. The employee patiently continues his explanation. He explains that every dryad born into the world originates from these fruits. However, until the fruit completely blooms inside the greenhouse, nobody knows what kind of dryad is hidden inside. Sometimes, no dryad exists within the fruit at all. Listening to this explanation, Druid cannot help thinking that the entire system is incredibly disappointing. The employee continues by explaining that the stone plate reveals genetic information during the germination stage. The rarer and more valuable the displayed information is, the higher the dryad's final grade will become. At that moment, Druid remembers the conversations she overheard earlier inside the orchard about unique grade dryads being incredibly rare. Everything finally begins making sense. So that is why everyone had been shouting about grades. She even wonders whether names like wild ginseng belong to some special grade dryad. The employee further explains that if someone dislikes the displayed genetic information, they may simply stop the blooming process. Druid looks surprised. The employee smiles before revealing that ordinary grade fruits can instead be processed into fertilizer. Confused, Druid asks what fertilizer is used for. He explains that lower grade fruits become nutrients capable of strengthening higher grade dryads. Just then, Daisy suddenly speaks in a hesitant voice. She apologetically tells Druid that she has just remembered something extremely urgent and asks whether she may leave first. Druid looks surprised by the sudden request and asks why she is leaving so suddenly. Daisy hurriedly hands over the remaining fruits they selected together before apologizing once more. She insists that the matter is truly urgent and admits that she completely forgot about it earlier. Without waiting any longer, Daisy quickly runs away. Watching her disappear into the distance, Druid sighs. She quietly thinks that perhaps she kept Daisy with her for far too long. Concerned about the little girl, she immediately asks the employee how long the blooming process normally takes. The employee watches Daisy leave with a strangely thoughtful expression before quietly remarking that her behavior is rather unusual. When Druid asks what he means, he simply shakes his head and says that it is nothing important before encouraging her to place the first fruit onto the stone platform. Following his instructions, Druid carefully places the fruit onto the stone box. The fruit immediately begins vibrating. Her eyes light up with excitement. Finally, she eagerly waits to see what kind of dryad will appear. However, the next instant, glowing letters appear above the fruit. No data. Druid completely freezes. The employee awkwardly scratches his cheek before sympathetically commenting that she truly has terrible luck. He explains that this particular fruit simply does not contain the genetic information of any dryad. Trying to remain optimistic, Druid immediately places the second fruit onto the platform. Once again, no data. She hurriedly tries the third fruit. Again, no data. The fourth fruit produces exactly the same disappointing result. By this point, Druid can hardly believe her own eyes. Inside her mind, she cries that 4 out of 6 fruits have already turned out to be complete failures despite costing an unbelievable amount of diamonds. She begins wondering whether this game is actually cursed. Seeing her disappointed expression, the employee kindly reminds her that failed fruits can still be sold as fertilizer. If she receives a reasonable price for them, she can always purchase more fruits later, so she should not lose hope. Druid sighs deeply. Although she possesses more diamonds than she could ever spend, she had genuinely been looking forward to meeting her very first dryad. She silently pleads that the next fruit must not disappoint her. Finally, she picks up the fruit Daisy personally selected earlier. Holding it tightly, she quietly begs that it contains absolutely anything at all. Whether it turns into a powerful dryad or merely something she has to carefully raise herself does not matter anymore. She simply wants it to succeed. With growing anticipation, she gently places Daisy's fruit onto the stone platform. The fruit immediately begins glowing. Unlike the previous attempts, it starts cracking open. Druid excitedly gasps. This time, it definitely feels different. A small green sprout slowly pushes through the shell before delicate leaves begin unfolding one after another. Looking at the adorable little plant emerging before her eyes, Druid is completely captivated. Inside her mind, she can only think that it is unbelievably cute. At that very moment, glowing information appears above the newly sprouted plant. Its name is revealed as elderflower. Along with the name, a detailed status window appears, displaying information about its title, language, habitat, and various other characteristics, confirming that this time, she has finally succeeded in obtaining her very first dryad. Druid continues staring at the status window of the newly obtained elderflower while countless thoughts run through her mind. She reflects that she has always grown especially attached to everything that was first in her life. Whether it was her very first pet, the first piece of equipment she obtained in a game, or even the first mercenary she recruited, she never had the heart to discard any of them. Even after they became obsolete and were no longer useful, she never sold or threw them away. Instead, she carefully kept them like lucky charms. To her, their value never came from their strength alone. What made them precious was the simple fact that, among countless possibilities, they were the very first to choose her. While she is immersed in those sentimental thoughts, another notification suddenly appears above the blooming plant. Final confirmed rank, unique. For a brief moment, Druid freezes. Then her eyes widen to their limit. Inside her mind, she excitedly screams in disbelief. A unique! She immediately begins jumping around with excitement, barely able to contain herself. She remembers all the people inside the orchard making such an enormous fuss over unique grade dryads earlier. Now her very first draw has actually turned out to be one. She almost feels like crying from happiness. Inside her mind, she excitedly boasts that she wishes everyone from outside could see how incredible her very first pull is. Watching her joyful reaction, the greenhouse employee smiles before explaining that a dryad possessing both recovery and support attributes is exceptionally rare. He confidently tells her that this dryad will undoubtedly become an enormous asset during combat. He then politely asks whether she wishes to bloom it immediately. Druid enthusiastically agrees without a second thought. At the same time, she begins analyzing everything from a gamer's perspective. Inside her mind, she concludes that she has apparently obtained a healer. In practically every game she has ever played, an excellent healer is capable of carrying an entire party. If she can recruit a powerful damage dealer afterward, then her starting lineup will become practically unbeatable. The employee nods before requesting that she present her terrarium artifact. The smile instantly disappears from Druid's face. She blinks several times in complete confusion. Inside her mind, one question echoes repeatedly. Terrarium artifact? She has absolutely no idea what that even is. Feeling increasingly uneasy, she hesitantly asks whether not possessing a terrarium artifact means she is not actually a druid. As soon as those words leave her mouth, a terrifying thought flashes to her mind. What if she is not the player after all? What if she is merely some insignificant NPC? Her precious unique dryad. The employee gently shakes his head before reassuring her that this is not the case. He calmly explains that her concern has already been disproven. According to him, she is unquestionably a genuine druid. The only issue is that she appears to be missing extremely basic knowledge that every druid normally possesses. Feeling embarrassed, Druid awkwardly explains that she had a very sheltered upbringing. Naturally, the real reason is that she has literally been dropped into the world without any prior knowledge. The employee continues explaining that the very first concern she mentioned has already been answered. She truly is a druid. Otherwise, none of what has happened so far would have been possible. Hearing such certainty leaves Druid stunned. Curious, she asks how he can be so certain. The employee explains that ordinary humans are incapable of communicating with dryads. Although dryads can understand human speech, normal humans can never understand dryads in return. Despite possessing appearances very similar to humans, their true existence is nothing more than plants. A druid, however, is someone personally blessed by the world tree. That blessing grants them the ability to communicate with nature itself. For that very reason, only druids are capable of conversing with and understanding dryads. The explanation leaves Druid speechless. Suddenly another question enters her mind. She immediately asks whether the employee himself is also a dryad. He calmly replies that he is not. Instead, he quietly reveals something that completely overturns everything Druid believed until now. The red-haired child who accompanied her earlier, Daisy, is actually a dryad. Druid's eyes instantly widen. Her entire body freezes. Inside her mind, she repeats the revelation several times. Daisy was a dryad? As countless memories replay inside her head, she suddenly realizes that Daisy's name itself is the name of a flower. Even so, she remembers how naturally Daisy seemed to interact with the innkeeper. However, after thinking more carefully, she suddenly notices something strange. She cannot actually remember Daisy having a real conversation with the innkeeper. The innkeeper had been the one speaking almost the entire time. The employee continues explaining that Daisy belongs to a very common plant species with numerous different strains. That similarity initially made him uncertain of her identity. However, after observing her more carefully, he is now completely convinced that Daisy is indeed a genuine dryad. That is precisely why he originally assumed Druid had already completed the soul link with her. However, after witnessing Daisy leave on her own without staying beside Druid, he realized that assumption must have been incorrect. Everything becomes increasingly confusing for Druid. Inside her mind, she reflects that the very first person who kindly helped her after arriving in this unfamiliar world was actually a dryad all along. She had spent so much time wondering what dryads were. Meanwhile, one had been standing beside her the entire time. She simply never realized it. Feeling an unexpected warmth inside her heart, she silently promises herself that once everything here is finished, she will definitely search for Daisy again. The employee then continues with another explanation. He tells Druid that she already possesses her own terrarium artifact. The only problem is that she simply has not awakened it yet. He explains that dryads cannot survive for long after becoming separated from the world tree. Therefore, every druid must provide them with an environment resembling the world tree itself. That sanctuary eventually becomes a miniature world tree connected directly to the druid's soul. Completely misunderstanding his explanation, Druid innocently asks whether that means she has to become a tree herself. The employee immediately falls silent. An awkward atmosphere fills the greenhouse. Meanwhile, Druid internally dies from embarrassment, convinced that he must think she is unbelievably foolish. Thankfully, the employee patiently explains that becoming a tree is not necessary. Instead, she only needs to offer the fragment of her soul that carries the blessing of the world tree. That fragment naturally becomes the resting place for her dryads. He instructs her to calm herself and search for that blessed piece of her own soul. Normally, every new druid learns this process directly from their predecessor. Inside her mind, Druid summarizes the explanation by concluding that she simply skipped the entire tutorial. Closing her eyes, she desperately wonders how she is supposed to locate something as abstract as a fragment of her soul. She silently calls out to the world tree. She asks its blessing to answer her. The employee gently tells her not to overthink everything. Instead, he instructs her to simply accept the feeling of the greenhouse into her body. He explains that this greenhouse was created to resemble the environment surrounding the world tree itself. Following his advice, Druid slowly empties her thoughts. She begins sensing the refreshing air flowing across her skin. She notices the gentle warmth of the sunlight, the cool scent drifting from the nearby pond, the rich fragrance of fresh soil. Little by little, she finally feels something respond from deep within herself. The employee smiles before praising her. He tells her that she has done well. Druid slowly opens her eyes. The very first thing she notices is an unfamiliar bracelet wrapped around her wrist. Completely confused, she asks when she received it. The employee smiles warmly before informing her that this bracelet is her terrarium artifact. Druid immediately becomes excited. Inside her mind, she practically screams that she has finally obtained a genuine game item. Filled with curiosity, she begins examining the bracelet from every possible angle. Everything about this world becomes more fascinating by the minute. The employee explains that dryads can live safely inside the terrarium artifact since it remains directly connected to their druid. Whenever they become injured or exhausted, they can return there to recover and rest peacefully. Hearing this explanation, Druid immediately compares it to the My Room feature found in many mobile games. She excitedly imagines herself collecting countless different dryads and filling the terrarium with them. The thought alone makes her incredibly excited. Finally, the employee hands her the blooming seed. He instructs her to place it inside the terrarium artifact. Before she does so, he explains one final rule. The moment the seed blooms, it permanently imprints itself upon the very first person it touches. Without hesitating any longer, Druid gently taps the seed resting on her palm. The tiny seed immediately floats upward into the air. She watches in amazement as it rises higher and higher before an intense flash of brilliant light fills the entire greenhouse. The light gradually begins taking human form. From within the glowing radiance, a handsome young man with long white hair slowly descends from the sky. He gracefully steps onto the ground as though walking down invisible stairs from heaven itself. His elegant appearance makes him resemble an angel more than a plant spirit. Druid can only stare with wide eyes. The newly born dryad calmly looks directly back at her. Inside her mind, Druid immediately notices that there is something strangely intimidating about him. The dryad silently observes her before finally speaking. He asks whether she is the one who bloomed this body. Then, after taking one more careful look at her, he bluntly comments that whoever awakened him seems remarkably sloppy. The moment those words reach her ears, Druid immediately has a terrible feeling. Inside her mind, she sighs in despair. She had somehow managed to summon a dryad with an absolutely awful personality. The story continues as Druid stares at the newly summoned dryad in complete disbelief. The very first word he uses after meeting his master is sloppy, leaving her both irritated and speechless. Inside her mind, she repeatedly questions whether that is really the first thing someone should say after meeting another person for the very first time. Her annoyance grows immediately as she compares him with Daisy, who had been gentle, polite, and considerate from the very beginning. Unable to understand his behavior, she asks the greenhouse caretaker whether every dryad is like this. She points out that Daisy certainly was not. Instead, Daisy had been kind, warm-hearted, and incredibly pleasant to be around. The caretaker calmly explains that the difference lies in a level of closeness. A dryad that has only just entered the world is unfamiliar with everything around it. For this reason, it instinctively evaluates the druid it has been linked to, deciding whether that person is truly worthy of its loyalty and trust. Before Druid can process the explanation, the dryad steps directly in front of her and openly begins criticizing her appearance. Looking her up and down with complete disappointment, he questions why she is wearing such worn-out clothes. He bluntly remarks that he had hoped to be summoned by a wealthy druid instead of someone who looks like a homeless traveler. His arrogance only continues to grow as he proudly declares himself to be a gift from the gods, someone admired by countless other dryads. According to him, a dryad of his status deserves luxurious treatment. He begins describing the ideal life he expects, saying that he should have a magnificent temple made entirely of gold, crystal-clear streams flowing around him, and even a golden statue built in his own image so everyone can admire him. Listening to such shameless demands leaves Druid completely dumbfounded. Internally, she wonders whether the caretaker's explanation about low closeness really applies here, since this seems less like unfamiliarity and more like an absolutely terrible personality. She cannot help comparing him to the elegant promotional illustrations she remembers from Terrarium Adventure. His appearance truly resembles one of those handsome fantasy characters with flawless proportions, silver white hair, and a face worthy of being displayed on the game's cover art. Looking at him more carefully, she admits to herself that he is unbelievably handsome and built like a model. It almost makes her feel sorry that such incredible looks have been wasted on someone with such an unbearable personality. The Dryad notices her reaction but remains completely unconcerned. Instead, he arrogantly suggests that she should simply abandon him. According to him, he would rather return to the World Tree and wait until a proper owner eventually summons him. His words immediately make Druid turn toward the caretaker with concern. She asks whether it is actually possible to abandon a Dryad after already summoning it. The caretaker explains the consequences in detail. He says that if the soul link between a Druid and a Dryad is broken, the Dryad eventually becomes a wild Dryad. After wandering for a very long time, its strength gradually fades until it ultimately returns to the World Tree. However, that journey is incredibly painful. A wild Dryad constantly suffers from freezing cold, unbearable thirst, and the horrifying sensation of its body slowly withering away like a dying plant. It is a lonely and miserable existence. Even after hearing such consequences, the Dryad stubbornly insists that it would still be better than accompanying someone like her. He confidently declares that he has no intention of going on a pathetic adventure with a poor master. That final insult completely destroys Druid's patience. Her expression darkens as she silently reaches into her pocket and pulls out her phone. Inside her mind, she thinks that this arrogant Dryad clearly believes he already understands everything about her. If the issue is money, then she is more than happy to prove him completely wrong. Without saying another word, she opens Infinite Dia and vigorously shakes her phone. Just as before, sparkling diamonds begin pouring out one after another onto the ground. The Dryad's expression changes almost instantly. His eyes widen. The arrogance disappears. His pupils begin sparkling brighter than the diamonds themselves. Druid immediately notices the dramatic transformation and cannot help thinking that he is unbelievably easy to read. She continues shaking the phone while casually counting the diamonds as they continue falling. 1, 2, 20. The pile keeps growing larger. The Dryad remains completely frozen as he watches the mountain of gemstones forming before him. Druid smirks before teasing him. She asks whether he wants some diamonds. His pride clearly refuses to accept the offer, yet his body tells a completely different story. Inside her mind, Druid wonders whether the flower language connected to Elder Flower's devotion actually refers to devotion toward diamonds rather than devotion toward people. Thinking back to Daisy, she remembers how adorable Daisy looked whenever she became excited. Unfortunately, she cannot say the same about this arrogant snow-haired narcissist. The Dryad slowly approaches the growing pile of diamonds while trying to maintain his dignity. Seeing the opportunity, Druid decides to push him even further. She mockingly calls him eye candy trash before asking once again whether he wants the diamonds. The insult immediately makes him glare at her with obvious anger. However, Druid refuses to back down. Inside her mind, she decides that since he chose to be rude from the very beginning, she has absolutely no reason to treat him gently. She confidently reminds herself that her own personality is not exactly easy to deal with either. She continues shaking the phone, causing even more diamonds to rain onto the floor. The Dryad's eyes begin sparkling once again. At that moment, Druid reaches her conclusion. If he insists on behaving like a spoiled dog, then she will simply become the one holding the leash. Pointing toward the diamonds scattered across the floor, she calmly orders him to kneel down and pick them up. His pride is visibly wounded. For several moments, he struggles against the humiliation. Then his overwhelming love for diamonds wins. He slowly drops onto both knees. Looking up at her with sparkling eyes that have completely lost their earlier arrogance, he softly asks whether she truly intends to give all those diamonds to him. Watching such a dramatic personality shift leaves Druid completely stunned. She had fully intended to keep treating him harshly. Instead, now that he is kneeling there with that unbelievably handsome face, he somehow resembles an obedient puppy rather than an arrogant noble. She quietly mutters to herself that his face really is unfairly attractive. Holding up her phone once again, she promises that every single diamond there belongs to him. The Dryad immediately lights up with excitement. Druid sighs to herself. She cannot deny it anymore. He is simply too handsome to keep refusing. Without realizing it, she begins gently patting his head while internally admitting that perhaps she is the easier one to manipulate after all. The caretaker watches the entire exchange with amusement before clapping his hands together. With a smile, he remarks that it appears she has already discovered a very effective method for increasing their level of closeness. Druid becomes slightly embarrassed after hearing that observation. The caretaker further comments that everything seems to have worked out perfectly. In his opinion, the Dryad has undoubtedly met the right master. The unexpected praise causes Druid to blush. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she hurriedly tells the Dryad to stand up already. She explains that watching her own Dryad kneeling in front of her is becoming incredibly embarrassing. She promises that later she will give him even more diamonds than the ones scattered across the floor. The Dryad obediently stands up without any further complaints. Watching his complete transformation, Druid cannot help thinking that she suddenly feels less like a fantasy adventurer and more like a professional dog trainer. The caretaker then asks whether she intends to bloom the remaining fruit as well. She immediately answers yes. However, Elderflower quickly protests. He cannot understand why she would need additional Dryads when someone as perfect as himself is already standing beside her. Druid patiently explains that he is mainly a recovery and support type. Every proper party also needs a reliable attacker. Elderflower stubbornly insists that he can fight perfectly well too. Druid simply stares at his elegant staff before sarcastically responding that she seriously doubts someone carrying such a delicate-looking lance could possibly be a frontline fighter. She then asks whether his real concern is simply that she might spend more diamonds on other Dryads instead of him. He immediately looks away while blushing, unintentionally confirming her suspicion. Smiling confidently, Druid reassures him that he has absolutely nothing to worry about. She possesses more diamonds than she could ever spend. She jokes that even after filling his pockets with diamonds, there would still be enough left to fill the entire greenhouse. In fact, there might even be enough to purchase the whole orchard. Listening to those words makes Elderflower blush even harder. Watching his constantly changing expressions, Druid cannot help wondering how someone can switch between arrogance, greed, embarrassment, and devotion so quickly. Still, she silently prays that the next Dryad will at least show a little more respect toward its master instead of being completely obsessed with diamonds. Picking up another fruit, she gently places it onto the stone platform. Inside her mind, she hopes this one will become an attacker. As the fruit begins glowing, she watches every movement with anticipation. The shell slowly cracks apart. A tiny hand becomes visible through the opening. Realizing another Dryad is about to be born, Druid quietly prays that this one will at least resemble Daisy's gentle personality, even if only halfway. Moments later, another notification appears before her eyes. Final confirmed rank, Special. Druid's eyes immediately widen. She stares at the glowing message in complete surprise as only one thought echoes through her mind. Special? The caretaker stares at the newly formed notification in complete disbelief before turning toward Druid. With obvious excitement in his voice, he reveals that it has been 10 whole years since a special grade Dryad last appeared. His words immediately emphasize just how extraordinary her luck truly is. As the notification continues floating in front of her, detailed information regarding the newly awakened Dryad begins appearing one line after another. His name is Velvet Mesquite, followed by various details such as his flower language, natural habitat, characteristics, and other information recorded by the World Tree. Druid carefully reads through the description while trying to process everything. Inside her mind, she begins wondering whether Special is actually a higher rank than Unique. She had originally believed that all of her luck had already been used when Elderflower appeared as her very first summon. Now, another incredibly rare Dryad has appeared immediately afterward. Unable to believe the situation, she quietly concludes that this must be what people call beginner's luck. However, another thought quickly follows. She remembers Elderflower's unbearable personality and cannot help wondering whether rarity and personality might actually be inversely proportional. Inside her imagination, she pictures another unbelievably arrogant Dryad appearing, looking down on her while demanding mountains of gold before even introducing himself. The image alone makes her sigh. Before she can think any further, the caretaker gently reminds her that she should bloom the fruit as soon as possible. Druid nods. Inside her mind, she convinces herself that she has absolutely nothing to lose anymore. Even if another Dryad with a terrible personality appears, she has already discovered the perfect solution: diamonds. She confidently believes that enough diamonds can suppress almost any attitude. With renewed determination, she places the fruit into her palm before lightly tapping the seed. Immediately, it begins floating into the air just like elderflowers had done. Druid watches the floating seed with surprise. Moments later, brilliant light bursts outward. Unlike the gentle radiance from before, this light is accompanied by an overwhelming wave of scorching heat. A powerful gust sweeps through the greenhouse. Druid instinctively raises both arms to shield her face. Inside her mind, she compares the burning wind to the blazing heat of a desert. Before she can fully recover, something suddenly comes crashing down from the sky directly toward her. She instinctively freezes. However, Elderflower immediately steps between them. With incredible speed, he catches the falling object in one hand before it can strike her. Looking down at it, he casually remarks that it seems a special grade dryad certainly knows how to make an entrance. Druid carefully looks at the object in his hand before realizing it is an enormous shield. Her eyes widen. A barrier? Meanwhile, she secretly glances toward Elderflower. Watching him protect her despite his constant complaints makes her briefly wonder whether he is actually jealous of the newcomer. At that exact moment, the glowing seed high above finally blossoms completely. Dark robes flutter through the air. Heavy armor gradually forms around a tall figure. Steel boots touch invisible ground before descending slowly. A magnificent lance materializes beside him. Piece after piece of armor assembles itself until a fully armed knight stands proudly before everyone. Druid completely freezes. Her mouth hangs open. Inside her mind, only one thought remains. He looks unbelievably cool. Elderflower had been so dazzlingly beautiful that she could barely keep her eyes open because of his overwhelming elegance. Velvet Mesquite, however, leaves an entirely different impression. Rather than beauty alone, his enormous physique radiates crushing pressure. His presence feels powerful enough to dominate an entire battlefield. The moment his sharp golden eyes sweep across the surroundings, Druid instinctively shrinks back. Inside her mind, panic rapidly takes over. She becomes convinced that if that enormous lance even grazes her body, she would immediately lose her life. Looking toward his massive shield does not make her feel any better. She honestly believes getting struck by that thing would be equally fatal. Standing before such a gigantic armored figure makes her feel unbelievably small. Without saying a word, Velvet Mesquite slowly raises his lance into the air. Druid's heart nearly stops. Inside her mind, she begins screaming. Is he actually going to attack me? She hurriedly waves both hands. Wait! Let's calm down first. Before she can finish worrying, the armored dryad gently lowers both his shield and lance onto the ground instead. The heavy lances land with tremendous force. Afterward, he calmly removes his armored helmet. Long golden hair flows freely down his shoulders. His handsome face finally becomes visible. Walking directly toward Druid, he respectfully kneels before her before gently taking her hand. With a deep, calm voice, he explains that it has been many decades since he last met a Druid. Looking carefully at her, he quietly comments that this generation's Druid appears surprisingly thin and rather fragile. Then, placing one hand over his chest, he solemnly makes a vow. Until the day he returns to dust, he promises to protect the one destined to become his master with his entire body. Druid becomes completely speechless. Her cheeks instantly turn bright red. Then, completely destroying the solemn atmosphere, Velvet Mesquite politely asks whether he may call her Uni. The unexpected request instantly overwhelms her. Her eyes begin filling with tears. Inside her mind, she wonders how someone this handsome can also be this polite. Before the emotional moment can continue, Elderflower suddenly interrupts. Looking toward Velvet Mesquite with obvious annoyance, he bluntly asks whether his entire race had not already gone extinct. Velvet Mesquite calmly turns toward him. He says that he had originally been curious about Elderflower's identity as well, but now he realizes that he is simply the young dryad from before. He further explains that he never became extinct. Instead, he merely returned to the World Tree. According to him, his previous master believed he still had unfinished work remaining in this world. For that reason, he has now been allowed to bloom once more. Elderflower folds his arms before proudly reminding Velvet Mesquite that he is their master's very first dryad. Velvet Mesquite gently smiles. He says that such things are unimportant to him. He has no desire to become the main dryad. As long as he can remain beside his master throughout every battle and protect her with his life, that alone is enough for him. Listening to his deep, husky voice makes Druid's heart skip another beat. Inside her mind, she quietly admits that his voice sounds unbelievably attractive. Velvet Mesquite then respectfully turns back toward her. Looking directly into her eyes, he gently asks for the name of the master he has sworn to protect. Druid almost blurts out her real name. Jae-hee. The words nearly leave her lips before she quickly stops herself. Instead, she remembers the nickname she has always used while playing games. Smiling awkwardly, she introduces herself simply as Jay. Inside her mind, she decides that using her online nickname is probably much safer in this unfamiliar world. Velvet Mesquite respectfully bows his head once again. He repeats her chosen name before promising that he will devote his entire strength toward protecting Jay from this day onward. Those words completely melt Druid's heart. Inside her mind, she desperately wishes that he will continue protecting her forever. She even jokingly thinks she would happily entrust her entire life to him if he keeps acting this dependable. Meanwhile, Elderflower quietly watches the entire exchange from the side. His displeased expression becomes increasingly obvious. Jealousy is written all over his face. Druid notices his reaction but cannot help smiling. At that moment, another exciting thought enters her mind. Her current luck is unbelievable. She already possesses both a unique and a special grade Dryad. If people truly know when to stop and when to continue gambling, then perhaps this is actually the perfect time to keep going. She honestly does not even care about rarity anymore. If she continues pulling more fruits, perhaps she will simply keep meeting even more handsome and beautiful Dryads. The thought alone fills her with excitement. However, just as she begins considering another summon, a strange dizziness suddenly overwhelms her. Her vision begins spinning. She instinctively grabs her head. Inside her mind, she wonders what is happening to her all of a sudden. Both Dryads immediately notice something is wrong. Their expressions change instantly. Before Druid can steady herself, her legs give way beneath her. She collapses toward the ground. Both Elderflower and Velvet Mesquite rush forward in panic. At the same time, they shout her chosen name. Jay! Before she can completely collapse, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately catches her by the shoulder with surprising gentleness. Looking at her exhausted state, he calmly remarks that his master, Jay, is even weaker than a young human child. Hearing those words, Jay cannot help thinking that he is unbelievably handsome, but unfortunately her head is spinning so much that she does not even have the leisure to properly admire his face. The Elderflower Dryad then walks over and gently places his hand on top of Jay's head. He explains that although his healing abilities are primarily meant for Dryads, they also work on humans. A warm and soothing energy flows through her body, instantly washing away the dizziness that had overwhelmed her moments ago. Feeling the difference immediately, Jay looks at him in surprise before admitting that she already feels much better. The Elderflower Dryad proudly smiles before casually saying that the treatment will cost 100 diamonds. His completely serious expression makes Jay's soul practically leave her body in shock, only for him to turn away a second later and admit that he is joking. Just then, the caretaker approaches and explains that Jay has already reached the limit of her soul. Confused, she asks what that even means. The caretaker reminds her that Druids and Dryads are connected through their souls. Since a Druid must become a small world capable of exchanging power with Dryads, every contracted Dryad consumes a portion of that soul power. Furthermore, the higher a Dryad's rank is, the greater the amount of soul power required to support them. If she tries to contract any more Dryads in her current condition, her body simply will not be able to endure the burden. Jay is completely devastated after hearing the explanation. In her mind, she immediately compares it to the one system she hated the most in every gacha game she had ever played, the dreaded character cost system. No matter how many character slots a player has, the total deployment cost always limits the team composition. If the maximum cost is 30, then only characters whose combined cost remains within that limit can be used. She had been dreaming about filling her entire terrarium artifact with countless handsome and powerful Dryads, yet now the game is already telling her that she cannot recruit anymore. Almost on the verge of tears, she desperately asks whether there is really no other method. The caretaker patiently explains that her soul power can naturally increase by spending time together with her contracted Dryads. However, the fastest method is to fight many battles alongside them. Jay immediately understands what he truly means. In simple gaming terms, she just needs to level up. Even though she still feels resentful that unlimited diamonds cannot bypass this restriction, she eventually accepts reality. After all, she has already obtained both a unique and a special Dryad, which is far luckier than she could have ever imagined. Remembering Daisy, Jay decides that it is finally time to leave and find her. Before doing so, she politely thanks the Velvet Mesquite Dryad for supporting her when she almost fainted. He bows respectfully and assures his master that she only has to tell him whenever she feels tired because he will always protect and support her. Hearing such sincere loyalty from someone so dependable makes Jay's heart feel incredibly full. She happily thanks him once again while secretly thinking that she truly cannot handle any more excitement today. Just as they are preparing to leave, another thought suddenly crosses her mind. Since she has only just received her terrarium artifact, she excitedly points toward the bracelet wrapped around her wrist and asks both dryads if they can enter it so she can finally see how it works. Without any hesitation, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad respectfully bows once again before saying that anything his master wishes is his command. Moments later, a brilliant flash of light surrounds him before his entire body transforms into light and disappears into the bracelet. Jay excitedly looks inside and is amazed by what she sees. The Dryad has become much smaller after entering. Although the interior is far smaller than she originally imagined, she is relieved to discover that it still looks comfortable enough for them to live inside. However, the Elder Flower Dryad immediately begins complaining the moment he enters. Looking around with obvious dissatisfaction, he remarks that the place looks completely deserted despite the fact that his master possesses so many diamonds. Hearing his criticism, Jay immediately asks where she can even buy furniture or decorations since nobody has explained that to her. He casually replies that everything can be purchased at the workshop before adding that he refuses to accept anything cheap. If she buys him furniture, it had better be luxurious, elegant, and expensive. Jay instantly loses her patience and tells him that she will decide what to buy herself before extending her bracelet toward him again, asking him to hurry inside already because she wants to observe what happens. Instead of obeying immediately, the Elder Flower Dryad complains that she treats the Quiet Dryad much more kindly than she treats him. If she could simply be nicer to him as well, he would appreciate it. Smiling awkwardly, Jay replies that once his attitude becomes nicer, she might consider returning the favor. Upon hearing that, he immediately becomes sulky and turns his face away. Even while pouting, however, his unbelievably handsome face makes it difficult for Jay to stay annoyed. She silently concludes that his appearance really is carrying his entire personality. Eventually, she promises that she will indeed give him plenty of diamonds, causing him to reluctantly enter the bracelet while quietly reminding her not to forget that promise. Watching him disappear, Jay cannot help wondering how someone living inside a bracelet is even supposed to spend diamonds. Curious, she mentally zooms into the terrarium artifact to observe both dryads. Inside, she notices that they immediately begin walking toward completely opposite directions while carrying their own lances. Completely confused, she wonders what they are doing. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad politely explains that he is preparing his own residence. Since his natural habitat is completely different from the Elder Flower Dryad's habitat, they cannot remain close together. The Elder Flower Dryad immediately becomes irritated upon hearing himself called a child once again. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad calmly replies that he still remembers the days when Elder Flower was merely a tiny sapling. Back then, he personally carried spring water to nourish him and even prepared the soil around him with great care. Listening to that conversation, Jay cannot help imagining it as the equivalent of an older sibling proudly claiming that he used to change someone else's diapers. Before her imagination can wander any further, the Elder Flower Dryad angrily interrupts, shouting that dryads do not grow the same way humans do and demanding that she stop imagining such strange things. Jay immediately freezes in embarrassment before wondering how he somehow knew exactly what she had been picturing. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad kindly explains that whenever their master is consciously observing the terrarium, all of her thoughts naturally flow directly into the minds of her contracted dryads. He even compliments her imagination by calling it adorable. Jay is left completely speechless after learning that absolutely none of her inner thoughts are private while she is connected to the terrarium. Continuing the conversation, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad casually remarks that he truly did raise Elder Flower with his own hands. The Elder Flower Dryad immediately denies remembering any of it whatsoever. The older Dryad simply laughs before explaining that Elder Flower probably cannot remember because those events happened long before his flowers had even bloomed. Without wasting any more time, both Dryads begin transforming their surroundings. Jay watches in fascination as the ground around the Velvet Mesquite Dryad slowly changes into a vast desert landscape. Suddenly, an enormous tree bursts upward from the ground, completely stunning her. She instantly realizes that this magnificent tree must be the original Velvet Mesquite plant itself. An exciting idea immediately forms inside her head. If every dryad brings their own mother plant into the terrarium, then collecting more dryads would slowly transform the bracelet into an enormous living botanical paradise. Almost as though he has read her mind once again, the velvet mesquite dryad confirms that she is absolutely correct. He proudly explains that his tree possesses roots capable of extending nearly 9 meters beneath the desert floor in search of underground water. For this reason, wherever his tree grows, groundwater will always exist beneath the desert. That is precisely why people eventually began worshipping him as the guardian deity of the desert. Wanting to impress his master even more, he happily points toward his blooming flowers and proudly declares that they are beautiful as well. Meanwhile, the elder flower dryad interrupts from the opposite side while proudly standing inside a breathtaking field completely covered with blooming elder flowers. Jay immediately becomes captivated by the beautiful scenery. The flowers look delicate, elegant, and incredibly fragrant. She quietly admits to herself that Elder Flower's handsome appearance perfectly matches the beauty of the flowers surrounding him. Hearing her genuine admiration immediately causes the Elder Flower dryad to become visibly proud. He confidently closes his eyes while trying to hide the faint blush spreading across his face. Satisfied that both of them seem completely occupied decorating their own homes, Jay quietly decides to leave them alone for now so she can finally search for Daisy. After leaving the orchard, she immediately notices that the entire place looks completely different from before. The once bustling daytime crowd has now disappeared beneath the evening sky. Looking around, she realizes just how much time has passed. The caretaker respectfully wishes Miss Truitt a safe journey. Jay warmly thanks him for patiently guiding her throughout the entire process. However, the caretaker politely insists that he should be the one expressing gratitude. According to him, thanks to Miss Truitt, today's harvest and transactions accomplished nearly 10 times more than usual. He sincerely hopes she was satisfied with his guidance before respectfully bowing toward her. Jay awkwardly laughs, but inside she cannot help feeling like an incredibly important VIP customer receiving premium treatment at an expensive department store. Back in the real world, she is just an ordinary shopper, yet inside Terrarium Adventure, she suddenly feels richer than celebrities carrying exclusive black cards. For a brief moment, she imagines herself walking proudly while carrying countless luxury shopping bags with attendants following behind her. The fantasy feels absolutely exhilarating. However, she quickly snaps back to reality. There is still one very important person she wants to find. With that thought in mind, Jay begins searching for Daisy. As Jay leaves the orchard, her excitement slowly begins to settle. While walking through the town, another thought suddenly crosses her mind. Come to think of it, she realizes that she knows almost nothing about Daisy. She does not know where Daisy went after leaving the orchard, nor does she know where the community center is located. A feeling of guilt gradually creeps into her heart as she wonders whether Daisy might have thought she was only pretending to be kind. Without giving it much thought, Jay finds herself unconsciously returning to the inn. Standing in front of the familiar building, she quietly takes a deep breath before stepping inside. The innkeeper immediately notices her arrival and warmly welcomes her back. He happily remarks that she has returned. Jay politely greets him before asking whether he actually remembers her. The owner smiles and says there is no way he could forget the druid who arrived together with Daisy. Without wasting any time, Jay immediately asks whether Daisy has stopped by the inn. She explains that they separated at the orchard, but there is still something important that she wants to tell the little girl. The innkeeper shakes his head with a disappointed expression. He explains that although he always tries his best to take care of Daisy whenever she visits, she actually does not come to the inn very often. Hearing that answer, Jay quietly lowers her gaze before another question suddenly comes to her mind. She hesitantly asks whether the owner knew all along that Daisy was actually a dryad. She explains that she herself only discovered the truth after someone else told her. The innkeeper is visibly surprised before letting out a small sigh. He admits that she has finally figured it out. At first, he genuinely believed that Jay already knew Daisy's identity. However, the longer he watched them together, the more he realized that she truly had no idea. Jay then carefully asks whether Daisy has been intentionally hiding the fact that she is a dryad. The owner remains silent for a brief moment before deciding to tell her everything. Since Jay appears to be a genuinely kind person, he feels that she deserves to know the truth. Furthermore, he feels sorry for Daisy and sincerely hopes that Miss Truitt might be able to take care of her. Jay becomes visibly surprised upon hearing those words. The owner slowly begins explaining Daisy's past. He says that Daisy first arrived in town around the exact same season 1 year ago. Then he asks Jay whether she understands what this particular time of year represents. Jay immediately remembers. It is the season when the branches of the world tree bear fruit. The innkeeper nods before revealing the heartbreaking truth. Daisy was never a wild-born dryad. She was born inside that very orchard. Jay's eyes immediately widen. That means Daisy originally belonged to a druid. She quietly realizes that Daisy once had a master. The owner falls silent again before sadly correcting her, only for a very short while. She was abandoned almost immediately afterward. Jay freezes in complete disbelief. Abandoned. The single word echoes repeatedly inside her mind. At that moment, she remembers the caretaker explaining what happens to abandoned dryads. A dryad left without a soul connection suffers endless cold, unbearable thirst, and slowly experiences the horrifying sensation of their entire body rotting away. Jay cannot help remembering Daisy's cheerful smile. Despite carrying such unimaginable suffering, the little girl had always smiled so brightly in front of her. Her heart begins aching. All this time, you endured that kind of pain by yourself? The innkeeper continues his story. He explains that Daisy's former master immediately became dissatisfied after discovering her abilities. Not only was Daisy an ordinary common rank dryad, but she also was not even a healing type. The man became so disappointed that he even attempted to use violence against her. Fortunately, another druid stepped in before things became even worse and compensated him with food instead. After receiving that payment, Daisy's former master immediately severed their soul connection on the spot. The moment the contract disappeared, Daisy ran away from the orchard as though she were desperately fleeing for her life. Jay's hands slowly tighten into fists. Her entire body trembles with anger. She cannot understand how anyone could ever treat such a gentle child so cruelly. The image of Daisy desperately running away from the orchard keeps replaying inside her mind. She feels overwhelming fury toward the man she has never even met. How could someone possibly hurt such a kind little girl? Everything finally begins making sense. That explains why Daisy had suddenly rushed away from the orchard earlier. The owner quietly continues. After learning what had happened, he could not simply ignore the child. He brought her food and looked after her whenever he could. Even though ordinary humans cannot communicate directly with dryads, Daisy was such an innocent and gentle child that her kindness could easily be understood simply by watching her expressions and action. Not once did she seem to blame anyone for what had happened to her. Listening to every word, Jay feels her chest tighten. Daisy had every reason to hate druids after what her former master did to her. Yet despite all of that, she still welcomed Jay with warmth, patiently answered every question, guided her through the unfamiliar town, and worried about her the entire time. Jay quietly wonders where Daisy is now. What is she doing? Is she eating properly? Is there anything at all that she can do to help her? Before she can think any further, the terrarium bracelet wrapped around her wrist suddenly begins glowing. A gentle light flashes across the room. Both the Velvet Mesquite Dryad and the Elderflower Dryad emerge from the bracelet. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately notices the sorrow on her face. With obvious concern, he gently asks what has happened. Since their souls are connected, all of Jay's agitated emotions have naturally flowed into them as well. The Elderflower Dryad also becomes serious for once. He asks whether someone has caused this. Was it another person, or was it another dryad? If she wishes, he immediately offers to analyze whoever is responsible. Jay slowly looks toward both of them before quietly asking the innkeeper whether she would be able to find Daisy at the community center. The owner nods. He says Daisy is most likely there. He kindly takes out a map and carefully marks the route leading toward the community center before handing it to Jay. As he gives her the map, he sincerely tells her that while watching her interact with Daisy, she truly looked like a kind-hearted druid. He gently adds that he hopes she can help heal the wounds Daisy has carried for so long. Jay silently accepts the map before giving him a determined nod. She quietly thanks him. Just then, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently steps closer. He asks whether the child named Daisy is the one making her so worried. Although Daisy is not a dryad connected to Jay's soul, he can clearly see how important she has become to his master. Jay softly admits that she simply wants to find Daisy. She explains that Daisy is an incredibly kind child who has been carrying immense pain alone. She helped Jay from the very beginning despite receiving nothing in return, yet Jay herself knew absolutely nothing about Daisy's suffering. As tears slowly begin gathering in her eyes, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently lifts her chin. Looking directly into her eyes, he softly tells her not to cry. Seeing his master cry makes his own heart ache as well. If finding Daisy is truly what his master wishes, then he will gladly help. He explains that locating Daisy may not be easy since she belongs to such a common plant species. However, it is certainly not impossible. With complete sincerity, the velvet mesquite dryad bows respectfully before declaring that he wishes to become his master's strength and will help her find Daisy no matter what. Leading Nian behind, Jay sets off together with the velvet mesquite dryad and the elderflower dryad. The three of them head toward the nearby woods, hoping to find some clue that will lead them to Daisy. Although Jay has no idea where to begin searching, both dryads appear surprisingly calm, as though they already have a plan. After walking a short distance into the forest, the velvet mesquite dryad steps forward and plants the butt of his massive lance firmly into the ground. In a calm yet confident voice, he explains that he is known as the guardian deity of the desert. Although most people only know that he can locate groundwater, that is merely one of his countless abilities. His roots are incredibly thick and stretch deep beneath the earth, allowing them to gather information from the land itself. Since every dryad born from the world tree leaves behind traces of its genetic information wherever it walks, he can use the memories stored within the soil to track a dryad's location. Meanwhile, the elderflower dryad clears his throat before proudly adding that although his title may be a gift from a god, his branches have also long been treasured as lucky charms. If he blesses velvet mesquite with his fortune, the probability of successfully locating Daisy will become much higher. Watching both of them immediately cooperate without hesitation, Jay feels warmth spreading through her heart. Only moments ago she had been overwhelmed with anxiety and guilt, yet now both of her contracted dryads are sincerely doing everything possible to help someone they have never even met. Unable to hide her gratitude, she smiles and sincerely thanks both of them. The velvet mesquite dryad quietly explains that since the bond between the three of them is already becoming stronger, the blessing will be even more effective. He then asks for one more detail about the dryad they are searching for. Jay immediately replies that Daisy has bright red hair. He nods thoughtfully. Knowing that the target is a red daisy significantly narrows down the search. The elderflower dryad then tells Jay to step back a little before either of them begins. Both dryads grip their lances. The velvet mesquite dryad slowly closes his eyes before driving his lance into the earth with overwhelming force. The lance pierces deep underground. An instant later, the entire forest begins rumbling violently. The ground trembles beneath Jay's feet as cracks spread across the earth. Her mouth falls completely open. She can only stare in amazement before blurting out a shocked "Whoa." Watching the tremendous display of power, the elderflower dryad cannot help asking whether he intends to flip the entire town upside down. The velvet mesquite dryad calmly replies that today is an unusual day. Since the world tree has recently borne fruit, countless dryads are currently gathered around the town. Dryads belonging to ordinary species usually emit extremely weak energy signatures, making them almost impossible to distinguish individually. However, he confidently assures Jay that she can trust him. He has absolutely no intention of disappointing his master. Standing nearby, the elderflower dryad quietly watches him with obvious jealousy. Without warning, he suddenly lifts Jay into his arms. Completely caught off guard, she immediately protests and asks what he thinks he is doing. The elderflower dryad calmly explains that velvet mesquite's earthquake ability is strongest near its center. If she remains standing there, she could easily get hurt. Meanwhile, the velvet mesquite dryad casually adds that his own roots extend so deeply beneath the earth that earthquakes cannot affect him in the slightest. Moments later, he suddenly opens his eyes. His expression immediately changes. He says that although he cannot pinpoint an exact location, he has managed to identify the general area where Daisy is most likely located. Jay immediately asks where. The velvet mesquite dryad points toward a location marked on the map. He explains that the signal is coming from the direction of the community center. Although he still cannot determine the precise position, he is confident that Daisy is somewhere within that area. However, his expression becomes noticeably more serious. Apart from Daisy's presence, he can also sense an abnormally large amount of dryad energy gathering in the same location. That unusual concentration makes him suspect that the dryad Jay is searching for may currently be in danger. The moment Jay hears those words, her eyes widen in alarm. Daisy is in trouble. Without another second of hesitation, she urges both dryads to hurry. Silently, she prays that velvet mesquite's suspicion is wrong. The three of them immediately sprint toward the community center. After some time, they finally arrive. Looking around, the velvet mesquite dryad explains that this is definitely the correct area. Unfortunately, the location is far too large to search efficiently. He asks Jay whether she would like him to use his roots one more time. Before she can answer, the elder flower dryad immediately objects. The buildings are packed much too closely together. Using another earthquake here would be extremely dangerous. While both dryads continue discussing possible options, Jay bends over while desperately trying to catch her breath. It has been such a long time since she last ran this much that she genuinely feels like she might throw up. Meanwhile, both dryads remain perfectly composed as though they have not become tired at all. While struggling to recover her breathing, Jay suddenly hears something unusual coming from the opposite side of a nearby wall. She immediately raises her head. Wait, there is definitely something happening over there. The velvet mesquite dryad instantly leaps onto the wall to investigate. Looking down at the opposite side, he suddenly falls completely silent. After a brief pause, he turns back toward Jay. He quietly asks whether the red-haired dryad she has been searching for is indeed the one she described earlier. The seriousness in his voice immediately tells Jay that something is wrong. Before she can climb up herself, the elder flower dryad wraps an arm around her waist. She instantly protests, insisting that she can climb using her own 2 feet. He immediately dismisses the idea. At her current pace, she would take forever. Besides, the wall is far too high for her anyway. Ignoring her complaints entirely, he effortlessly scales the wall while carrying her. Jay spends the entire climb screaming in panic. After finally reaching the top, she angrily declares that she almost got herself killed and promises that he will pay for frightening her so badly. However, the words suddenly die inside her throat. Below them stands a large group of men gathered together in a tight circle. Everyone appears to be staring towards something hidden in the center. Jay narrows her eyes. What are those men doing? Is someone trapped in the middle? The velvet mesquite dryad quietly mutters that a young seedling should never be found in a place like this. The world tree would never naturally send such a young dryad into the outside world. The elder flower dryad agrees before explaining that even if a dryad somehow left the world tree, the environment surrounding this town is completely unsuitable for one to naturally survive here. Jay immediately remembers Daisy's story. She quietly explains that the dryad she is searching for was forcibly abandoned and left in a wild state. Both dryads immediately freeze. The velvet mesquite dryad slowly explains the horrifying consequences. If the soul connection is broken without the agreement of both parties, then the druid has forcefully severed the contract. Normally, even after ending the connection, a druid must leave behind a portion of their own soul so the abandoned dryad can safely survive until eventually returning to the world tree. However, if that final act of mercy is never performed, the abandoned dryad gradually loses all of its power. Its body becomes contaminated. Eventually, it regresses into an extremely fragile seedling state. If that seedling weakens any further, it will completely disappear before returning to the world tree. Listening to the explanation, Jay feels as though every single word is describing Daisy. Her heart sinks. With trembling lips, she quietly asks whether Daisy is really down there. The velvet mesquite dryad remains silent. His silence alone gives her the answer. Without thinking, Jay looks toward the ground below and wonders whether she can simply jump down. Before she can act, the elder flower dryad immediately grabs hold of her. He simply tells her to hold on tightly. Without waiting for permission, he leaps down from the wall while safely carrying Jay before landing gracefully beside the velvet mesquite dryad. Now all 3 of them stand on the ground. The moment Jay raises her head, she immediately recognizes one familiar face. Standing among the crowd is the same superstitious man who caused trouble both at the inn and at the orchard. He lets out an irritated sigh the moment he sees her. Jay immediately points at him in anger. Isn't that the superstitious bastard from the orchard? She loudly orders him to move aside. She has something she absolutely needs to check. Before she can move forward, another man suddenly blocks her path by stretching a large leaf directly in front of her. A brilliant flash instantly appears. In the next moment, the velvet mesquite dryad slices the leaf cleanly in half with a single strike. Standing protectively before Jay, his expression turns ice cold. He firmly declares that no one is allowed to stand in Master Jay's way. If they value their lives, they should move aside immediately. The intimidating pressure radiating from him causes every man present to instinctively step backward. As the crowd slowly parts, Jay finally notices something lying between their feet. A tiny trembling hand quietly reaches out from the ground. The instant she recognizes it, her eyes widen in horror. Daisy. She is lying there motionless. Jay rushes forward without a moment of hesitation and immediately kneels beside Daisy. She carefully lifts the little girl into her arms while shouting her name in panic. Daisy's body feels frighteningly light, and her breathing is so weak that it almost seems as though it could disappear at any moment. Fear fills Jay's heart as she desperately turns toward the Elderflower Dryad and asks him to help her. Without wasting a second, the Elderflower Dryad gently places his hand on Daisy's forehead. A soft green glow begins spreading from his palm as healing energy slowly flows into her fragile body. The atmosphere around them becomes calm for a brief moment while everyone silently watches the healing take place. After examining Daisy's condition, the Elderflower Dryad slowly lowers his hand and explains that this Dryad cannot absorb all of his healing energy. Since their souls are not connected, his powers are already far less effective than usual. On top of that, he has no natural affinity or bond with the Daisy species. For this reason, although he can temporarily ease her suffering, her body and even her mind are crumbling much faster than his healing can restore them. Jay feels her heart sink. She immediately asks if that means it is impossible to completely heal Daisy. No one answers immediately. Instead, she tightly holds Daisy's trembling hand and desperately begs her to wake up. At that moment, the superstitious man clicks his tongue in annoyance before mocking the situation. He coldly remarks that they have lost perfectly good fertilizer. According to him, the Dryad had been wandering around alone, and since she apparently did not belong to anyone anymore, they were planning to use her body as manure. He then looks toward Jay before greedily reminding her that she possesses plenty of diamonds. Instead of being greedy over a dying normal-grade Dryad, he tells her to simply leave. If she hands Daisy over, he says they will gladly spare her life without spilling any blood. Those words instantly ignite Jay's anger. She slowly rises to her feet, her fists shaking violently. Grinding her teeth, she turns toward the man with burning eyes before asking if he is the bastard responsible for doing this to Daisy. The man shamelessly admits that he is. Instead of feeling guilty, he proudly explains that if it were not for Jay and Daisy interfering yesterday, he would have obtained a much better Dryad. Since Daisy was only a useless normal grade anyway, he had originally planned to kill her and use her as fertilizer. Before Jay can respond, another man standing behind him nervously interrupts. He points toward the Elderflower Dryad and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad, saying that something is wrong. The information they received claimed that Jay only had one red-haired Dryad with her. However, the two Dryads standing beside her clearly look like extremely high-grade ones. The superstitious man angrily orders him to shut up. Although one is merely a healing type and the other appears to be a defense type, he confidently declares that if all of their Dryads attack together, they still have a chance to win. As he finishes speaking, several hostile Dryads standing beside the group slowly step forward. Both the Elderflower Dryad and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately become alert. Jay watches everything unfolding before her while countless thoughts race through her mind. She cannot understand how Dryads are treated like disposable objects simply because their grades are low. Daisy's previous master abandoned her. Now these people are trying to turn her into fertilizer. She wonders how anyone could commit such horrible acts against such a kind little child without feeling even the slightest bit of guilt. Just then, a faint voice reaches her ears. "Miss Druid." Jay's eyes immediately widen. She quickly looks down and realizes Daisy has finally opened her eyes. Relieved beyond words, Jay gently tells her to stay still and not move because she needs to rest. Instead of worrying about herself, Daisy weakly looks toward the Elderflower Dryad and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad standing nearby. With a small smile, she congratulates Jay on obtaining such amazing Dryads. Those innocent words only make Jay's heart ache even more. She cannot understand how Daisy can congratulate someone else after suffering so much pain simply because she was considered low grade. Jay silently thinks that if Daisy had met a kind druid from the very beginning, she could have lived a completely different and much happier life. With tears forming in her eyes, Jay gently shakes her head. She tells Daisy that she cannot accept those congratulations yet. She reminds Daisy that she had already called her lucky charm. Her luck, she says, will never truly be complete without Daisy. Hearing those words leaves Daisy completely stunned. She slowly raises her hand toward her own face in confusion, unable to understand what Jay means. Jay gently reaches forward, wipes away Daisy's tears with her own hand, and softly holds her hand. Looking directly into her eyes, Jay sincerely says, "Become my Dryad, Daisy. Just like you brought me luck, I will make you happy." Without waiting for an answer, Jay carefully pulls Daisy into a warm embrace. As she hugs the tiny Dryad, she quietly realizes something. When she hugs the elder flower dryad or the velvet mesquite dryad, she can always sense the pleasant fragrance of flowers or plants. However, Daisy carries no scent at all. Instead, all Jay can smell is dry dust, like the scent of an ancient tree slowly dying. The realization hurts her heart. Daisy softly whispers that this must all be a dream. Jay gently shakes her head before reassuring her that it is not. Suddenly, Daisy's expression changes. She unexpectedly pushes Jay away. Jay stares at her in complete confusion. Daisy suddenly places both hands on Jay's shoulders before looking high into the sky as though she has noticed something invisible. Without saying another word, Daisy leaps upward and reaches toward the mysterious object floating overhead. The instant her fingers touch it, a brilliant flash of light explodes across the entire area. Jay instinctively closes her eyes. After the blinding light fades away, she slowly opens them again. For a brief moment, everything appears normal. Then she suddenly notices something is terribly wrong. She quickly turns around. Daisy has collapsed onto the ground once again. Before Jay can even react, the superstitious man roars in fury. He screams at Daisy, calling her nothing more than a worthless normal-grade brat before ordering his dryad to launch even more acid fruits. This time he declares that they will kill every one of them and use all of their bodies as fertilizer. The elder flower dryad instantly steps forward. Swinging his staff, he unleashes his ability. In the next instant, countless powerful shoots burst violently from beneath the ground. The sharp vines tear through several of the attacking men, instantly throwing their formation into complete chaos. At the same time, the velvet mesquite dryad positions himself directly in front of Jay. His massive shield blocks every incoming attack aimed at her while his enormous frame completely protects her from the battlefield. After making sure she is safe, he immediately turns toward her with visible concern and asks whether she is alright. Jay quickly replies that she is unharmed. However, her eyes never leave Daisy's unconscious body lying helplessly on the ground, and she anxiously points toward her, unable to think about anything except saving the little dryad. Blood continues dripping onto the ground from the bodies of the attackers that have been pierced by the massive shoots summoned by the elderflower dryad. The battlefield falls silent for a brief moment as everyone stares at the horrifying scene. Without wasting another second, the elderflower dryad raises his lance high into the air. A brilliant green light gathers around its tip before exploding into countless streams of healing energy that rush directly toward Daisy's fragile body. The healing light gently surrounds her, but after only a few moments, the glow begins fading away. The elderflower dryad slowly lowers his lance before speaking with a heavy expression. He explains that Daisy no longer has a soul vessel capable of absorbing his healing energy. Since there is nothing left that can receive his power, the healing can no longer reach her. He quietly declares that it is over. Those words strike Jay like lightning. She clenches both fists so tightly that her nails dig into her palms before desperately shouting that this cannot be the end. There has to be another way. Daisy cannot simply disappear after enduring so much suffering for such a long time. Unable to accept reality, Jay immediately reaches toward Daisy, who is lying motionless on the ground. She tightly grabs her tiny hand while tears continuously stream down her face. To her surprise, Daisy slowly opens her eyes. With an unbelievably peaceful smile, Daisy softly tells Jay that she is alright with the pain. She explains that the pain has gradually become dull, and after some time she could no longer feel anything at all. However, she says that if Miss Druid had gotten hurt instead, that would have broken her heart. She tells Jay that she is simply glad she is safe. Those gentle words completely overwhelm Jay with emotion. Daisy continues speaking with a faint but sincere smile. She says she is happy because, even if only for a short while, she met someone precious who truly wanted her. At first she believed everything had been nothing more than a beautiful dream. Small memories begin flashing through her mind. She remembers eating together at the inn. She remembers Jade treating her kindly. She remembers being carried through the crowded orchard. She remembers laughing together. Thinking about every moment she spent helping Miss Druid makes her realize that it was never a dream. It was a happy reality. Looking directly into Jay's tear-filled eyes, Daisy softly reminds her that she once called Daisy her luck. Then Daisy gently smiles before saying that Jay was her luck as well. She quietly adds that Jay was also her hope. Using the last of her remaining strength, Daisy gently squeezes Jay's hand as if trying to comfort her instead. Watching Daisy struggle to move only makes Jay cry even harder. She desperately tells Daisy not to close her eyes. Holding Daisy's hand as tightly as she can, she repeatedly begs her to stay awake. Inside her heart, Jay cannot stop thinking. Even if this world is only a game, this is the first time she has ever witnessed the death of someone she truly knows. Daisy was the very first person who approached her after she arrived in this unfamiliar world. She was the bright little child who became a guiding light while Jay knew absolutely nothing about this place. Jay cannot stop blaming herself. She wonders whether none of this would have happened if she had never gone to the orchard. Then another thought crosses her mind. Would that really have changed anything? Still crying uncontrollably, she continues holding Daisy close. Nearby, both the Elder Flower Dryad and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad silently watch everything unfold. Even their expressions become filled with sadness. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad suddenly calls out to Jay, telling her to raise her head and look carefully. The Elder Flower Dryad gently supports her shoulders, helping her lift her gaze despite the tears blurring her vision. As Jay slowly looks forward, a brilliant golden light suddenly surrounds Daisy's body. The light becomes brighter and brighter until it completely envelopes her. Then, within a single dazzling flash, Daisy's body slowly disappears. Instead of leaving behind darkness, countless glowing particles rise peacefully into the sky. Jay stares blankly at the disappearing light. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently extends his hand toward her. Resting on his palm is a softly glowing golden sphere. He respectfully places it into Jay's trembling hands before quietly explaining that this is the true home of the Dryad child. Jay carefully receives the glowing sphere with both hands. Her tear-filled eyes never leave it. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad begins explaining that dryads born from the World Tree normally return to it once their lives come to an end. However, when the mother plant combines with another species instead of remaining a pure World Tree species, it sometimes engraves a special purpose upon that dryad soul. For this reason, Daisy does not completely return to the World Tree. Instead, she remains here in another form. Jay carefully looks down. The glowing sphere slowly changes shape. Before long, it becomes a beautiful golden fruit radiating warm light. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad explains that this fruit contains Daisy herself. Jay immediately recognizes it. She softly whispers that it is the same kind of fruit from which dryads are born. As she gently holds it in both hands, tiny cracks slowly begin spreading across its glowing shell. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad smiles before revealing the incredible truth. The special purpose engraved into the souls of certain improved dryad species is resurrection. Daisy is preparing to be born once again. He gently tells Jay that this tiny fruit is the small hope that has returned to her. Jay quietly holds the fruit against her chest. She notices that it feels warm. It almost feels alive. Her mind immediately begins racing. She remembers blooming the other dryads earlier. She anxiously wonders whether she can bloom Daisy again right here. Or does she have to return all the way to the orchard? Before panic overwhelms her again, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently places a hand on her shoulder. He calmly tells Jay to breathe. He jokingly reminds her that she surely does not want to faint before she gets the chance to meet the little red flower again. His gentle teasing finally eases some of the tension inside her heart. He then explains that they simply need to return to the greenhouse where they first met. That is where Daisy can bloom again. He warmly says that they will go greet the little red flower once more. Then he promises to open the path for them. Without hesitation, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad grips his lance with both hands before slamming its butt against the ground. The impact sends tremendous force through the nearby wall, instantly breaking open a clear path for the three of them. Jay watches in surprise. She quietly realizes that he had already dealt with every remaining threat without her even noticing. Earlier she had been far too focused on Daisy to pay attention to anything else. Looking back at the battlefield now, she finally notices just how gruesome everything truly is. Even if this is a game, the amount of blood and violence is enough to make her stomach tighten. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad notices her expression. In a calm voice, he tells his master that she will eventually have to grow accustomed to sights like these. The path she is destined to walk will contain even harsher battles than this one. Then the Elder Flower Dryad firmly grips his lance before declaring that any enemy who dares stand in Master Jay's way will be pierced without hesitation. Even if that opponent happens to be another dryad born from the very same branch of the World Tree, it will make no difference. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad nods in agreement before adding that Jay is their small World Tree. She is the one who gives value to their existence and meaning to their lives. For that reason, they will never allow anyone to harm her. Hearing those sincere words, Jay slowly wipes away the remaining tears from her face. She tightens her grip around Daisy's warm golden fruit. Inside her heart, she quietly tells herself that she has to keep moving forward. Daisy's hope is resting safely in her hands now. She cannot afford to stop. With renewed determination, Jay nods toward both dryads. Together, the three of them begin walking toward the greenhouse, carrying the hope of Daisy's rebirth. Before long, the three of them finally arrive back at the orchard under the quiet night sky. The lively crowds that had filled the place during the day have completely disappeared. The once noisy orchard is now peaceful, with only the soft glow of the greenhouse illuminating the surroundings. Jay slowly looks around before quietly commenting that the orchard has become so quiet. She assumes everyone must have left after finishing their own dryad draws earlier in the day. The velvet mesquite dryad calmly tells her that there is no need to rush anymore. The elderflower dryad casually agrees, asking what the hurry is anyway. Hearing him speak so calmly after everything that happened earlier makes Jay secretly think that, despite his terrible personality, his face really does look surprisingly innocent whenever he is not being arrogant. As they continue walking, Jay suddenly notices a familiar figure standing nearby. She immediately recognizes the guy from earlier, the same caretaker who had been carrying the large treasure chest used to collect diamonds from the visitors. The caretaker notices Jay approaching alongside her two dryads. He respectfully bows his head before greeting her. He politely welcomes Miss Druid back and asks how he may assist her this time. Jay politely explains that she has returned because she wants to use the dryad pot once again. She asks whether that would still be possible at this hour. The caretaker instinctively glances toward the glowing fruit resting safely in Jay's hands. For just a brief moment, disappointment appears on his face, almost as though he had expected her to return for another expensive draw instead. Jay quietly notices his expression and cannot help thinking that his disappointment is showing a little too clearly. Realizing his reaction, the caretaker quickly regains his composure. He politely says that he will personally guide her there once again. The group follows him deeper into the orchard until they arrive back at the same glowing stone platform inside the greenhouse. Looking around the magnificent building once more, Jay quietly reflects on how she never imagined she would return here so soon. Even though it is already nighttime, the greenhouse shines with warm light that makes the entire place feel almost sacred. She remembers the caretaker previously explaining that this greenhouse was merely an imitation of the world tree. If even an imitation can be this breathtaking, she cannot begin imagining how magnificent the real world tree must be. Before she can continue thinking, the velvet mesquite dryad gently calls for Master Jay and reminds her that everything is ready. Jay looks down at the glowing fruit in her hands. She remembers how both dryads once told her that she herself is like a small world tree. However, she still cannot fully accept that idea. Inside her heart, she still thinks she is nothing more than an ordinary person. Well, an ordinary person who just happens to possess an absurd amount of diamonds. Carefully, she places the glowing fruit that contains Daisy onto the stone platform. Just before the blooming process begins, Jay suddenly remembers something extremely important. She quickly turns toward the caretaker and seriously asks him never to mention grades in front of Daisy. She tells him not to bring them up under any circumstances. The caretaker immediately understands what she means. He respectfully promises that he will be careful. Jay quietly thinks that she never wants Daisy to remember the painful memories of being abandoned simply because of her grade. The fruit suddenly begins glowing brighter. Small cracks slowly spread across its surface before it gently rises into the air. The shell finally bursts open. A glowing notification appears before Jay's eyes. Red Daisy alongside the name appears detailed information describing the dryad's title, flower language, natural habitat, and other characteristics. Seeing the familiar name immediately fills Jay with relief. She quietly thinks that it truly is Daisy. Her shoulders finally relax. As she continues reading, she notices Daisy's title, Endearing Spring Fairy. Jay cannot help smiling. She quietly wonders how a title can sound so unbelievably adorable. Although she also notices that Daisy is categorized as a support-type dryad, she decides that classifications do not really matter anymore. The important thing is that Daisy has returned. Jay happily reaches her hand forward, preparing to bloom the fruit completely. Just then, the caretaker suddenly interrupts her. He asks Miss Druid to wait for a moment. He reminds her of something extremely important. Is her soul limit truly capable of handling another dryad? Jay immediately freezes. Her eyes widen. She suddenly remembers the dizziness that overwhelmed her immediately after blooming the elderflower dryad and the velvet mesquite dryad earlier. She remembers feeling as though she were about to faint from severe anemia. Panic instantly fills her mind. She desperately wonders whether there are any consumable items that can increase soul capacity. Unfortunately, the only thing she possesses is an endless mountain of diamonds. She almost cries while wondering whether she can simply purchase higher levels with money. Before her panic can spiral further, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently places his hand upon her shoulder. In a calm voice, he tells Master J that there is no need to panic. He explains that her soul has already become significantly stronger compared to when they first met. He then asks her whether she has felt dizzy at all during the journey back to the orchard. Jay pauses. She realizes she has not. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad smiles before explaining that he has been watching her the entire time. His eyes never leave his master. For this reason, he can confidently say that Jay's soul has already recovered enough to welcome another flower. Jay's eyes immediately begin sparkling with excitement. She happily calls out his name. Watching this interaction makes the Elder Flower Dryad sigh in disappointment. Jay secretly notices his expression. Inside her mind, she realizes he has become upset again simply because she is about to bring another Dryad into the group. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad lightly teases him, telling Jay not to worry about Elder's constant complaints. According to him, the only reason the Elder Flower Dryad behaves like this is because he dislikes sharing Jay's attention with anyone else. He simply says that Elder is still an immature child. The Elder Flower Dryad immediately protests. Frustrated, he loudly asks whether everyone truly thinks he is a child. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad calmly replies that compared to himself, Elder is indeed much younger. Therefore, he will always remain a child in his eyes. Watching them argue makes Jay quietly smile. She cannot help thinking that the Velvet Mesquite Dryad truly must have raised Elder himself, just as he claimed before. Putting those thoughts aside, Jay happily tells herself that everything is going to be alright. Without any more hesitation, she gently taps the glowing fruit. Immediately, the fruit rises gracefully into the air. Golden light begins surrounding it before another brilliant flash fills the greenhouse. The shell blossoms open like a flower. A beautiful red daisy blooms from within. Moments later, a small figure gently descends toward the ground. The tiny girl lands softly on both feet. She slowly opens her eyes. The very first person she sees is Jay. With a warm smile full of familiarity, she softly says, "Miss Druid." Those two simple words instantly overwhelm Jay with emotion. She realizes that Daisy still remembers her. Unable to hold herself back any longer, Jay immediately stretches out both arms. Daisy happily runs toward her. The two embrace each other tightly. While holding Daisy close, Jay quietly notices something she had been unable to experience before. This time, she can finally smell Daisy's gentle floral fragrance. She silently smiles to herself. Her lucky Dryad has truly returned. Watching the reunion, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad thoughtfully observes that Daisy has returned in her young seedling state. He admits that he originally expected her to bloom in the same mature form she previously possessed. Daisy nods. She shyly admits that he is correct. She really was much taller before. Jay gently smiles before softly touching the little flower decorating Daisy's hair. She lovingly tells Daisy that none of that matters. Whether she is tall or small, Daisy will always be Daisy. Although Jay admits she is curious about what Daisy's grown-up appearance looks like, she is just as happy with the tiny version standing before her now. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad warmly reassures his master. He explains that Jay will not have to wait very long. Now that Daisy has been reborn as Jay's Dryad, she has become a true child of Jay's own world tree. Since Daisy belongs to an improved species, she will grow rapidly. Before long, she will naturally regain her original appearance. Jay immediately becomes excited. She eagerly asks what she can do to help Daisy grow faster. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad explains that Daisy simply needs plenty of nutrients. The moment Jay hears the word nutrients, another realization strikes her. She suddenly remembers the 4 failed fruits she obtained earlier. The fruits she had been calling complete bummers are actually filled with nutrients. Without wasting another second, she reaches into her pocket and pulls all 4 fruits out. She excitedly shows them to the Velvet Mesquite Dryad before asking whether these are the nutrients he meant. After receiving confirmation, Jay happily declares that she will give every single one of them to Daisy. The instant those words leave her mouth, the Elder Flower Dryad freezes in complete disbelief. His eyes widen dramatically before he loudly protests. He cannot believe that Jay intends to give every single nutrient fruit to Daisy alone. As the conversation continues, Jay points out that both of her Dryads are already fully grown, so Daisy should naturally receive the nutrient fruits instead. However, The elder flower dryad immediately protests and insists that he can still become stronger. He argues that the fruits should be given to him instead of that tiny seedling. Jay calmly explains that Daisy is an attacker, and attackers need to grow larger and stronger if they are going to deal meaningful damage in battle. Otherwise, the burden will simply fall on the rest of the team. The elder flower dryad stubbornly argues that he is already stronger than Daisy, making Jay sigh in frustration. Even in the middle of all of this, Daisy quietly tightens her grip on the fruits without backing away at all. Watching the little dryad stand her ground despite being confronted by someone much stronger fills Jay with pride, and she thinks that her baby is doing an excellent job. Jay then tells the elder flower dryad that he should actually be grateful to Daisy instead of complaining. The elder flower dryad immediately asks why he should ever be thankful to that little brat. Jay reminds him that Daisy was the one who picked the fruit that eventually bloomed into him. If it had not been for Daisy choosing that fruit, he might never have met a wealthy master like Jay. He certainly would never have had someone willing to shower him with endless diamonds. Hearing that leaves the elder flower dryad speechless. He begins grumbling under his breath while looking away in embarrassment. Jay cannot help smiling to herself and thinks that he has finally gone quiet. She decides that she can always comfort him with a few diamonds later. Changing the topic, Jay looks toward Daisy with curiosity. Daisy looks so tiny and delicate that it is difficult to imagine her as an attacker. She asks if Daisy is really an offensive type. Daisy confidently replies that she is, then politely asks if Jay would like to see her weapon. Before Jay can answer, Daisy swings her small knife through the air with surprising confidence. Watching the little dryad handle a blade so naturally catches Jay completely off guard. She thinks that Daisy suddenly looks incredibly cool. The velvet mesquite dryad then explains that appearances can be deceiving. He tells Jay that no one should ever judge a dryad simply by their size. Even the roots of an ordinary-looking seedling are capable of splitting apart enormous boulders. Daisy may have seemed weak while wandering alone without a master, but now everything has changed. She now has Jay beside her. Listening to that explanation reminds Jay of tiny weeds that somehow manage to grow through solid asphalt. She cannot help imagining Daisy cutting straight through enemies with that little knife. The velvet mesquite dryad continues explaining that there is, however, one unfortunate drawback. His own earthquake ability is extremely useful when fighting large groups of enemies, but Daisy's current seedling body would never be able to withstand that level of force. He gently pats Daisy's head while saying that she needs to grow stronger first. Since she has returned in a seedling state, her roots are still far weaker than they originally were. He sincerely hopes that she grows quickly and eventually becomes a powerful sword capable of protecting Master Jay. He affectionately tells the little seedling to take root. Daisy obediently nods and quietly answers that she will do her best. The velvet mesquite dryad then turns toward Jay and asks her to try picking Daisy up. Jay looks confused for a moment before remembering how she carried Daisy through the crowded orchard earlier that day. Since she has already done it once, she assumes it will not be difficult to repeat. The velvet mesquite dryad smiles and tells her not to force herself. Jay wonders what he means by that before carefully bending down and lifting Daisy into her arms. The instant she does, her entire body becomes dizzy. Her knees suddenly give way beneath her, forcing her to kneel on the ground before she can even fully stand. The elder flower dryad immediately looks down at her and bluntly remarks that every human really is as fragile as trash. Jay almost bursts into tears as she thinks that she spent more than half the day sitting around, yet somehow her back already feels as though it is about to break. Chuckling softly, the velvet mesquite dryad explains that this strange phenomenon is caused by Daisy's roots. He then effortlessly lifts Daisy into his own arms as though she weighs absolutely nothing. Holding her comfortably, he gently tells the little seedling that she should begin planting her roots firmly so he can continue pulling her out with his own strength. He explains that this is actually advanced training. By stimulating her roots repeatedly, they will gradually become much stronger. If she continues training like this, she may eventually become capable of enduring even as powerful earthquakes. Daisy's eyes sparkle with excitement as she asks if that is really possible. The velvet mesquite dryad confidently assures her that it certainly is. He casually mentions that he raised the elder flower dryad in exactly the same manner. Although the elderflower's mother plant naturally possessed stronger roots from birth, he still had to undergo the same harsh training before becoming capable of enduring those violent earthquakes. The moment Jay hears that, an amusing mental image appears inside her head. She imagines the enormous velvet mesquite dryad casually carrying a tiny crying elderflower dryad around while the younger dryad desperately protests. Unable to hold herself back any longer, Jay bursts into laughter. The elder flower dryad immediately turns bright red with embarrassment and shouts at her to stop laughing. He argues that among all giant-type dryads, the velvet mesquite dryad is already the strongest, so naturally there was no possible way for him to resist that training. Meanwhile, Daisy quietly declares that she will also work as hard as possible. She promises that she will grow quickly and return to her original size before long. After saying that, Daisy begins eating the nutrient fruits one after another. Jay watches curiously before realizing that this is apparently how dryads consume nutrients. Smiling warmly, she hands Daisy even more fruits and encourages her to keep eating. As Daisy continues absorbing the nutrients, a bright flash suddenly surrounds one of her hands. Jay watches in surprise as Daisy's old gloves transform into a brand new pair. Daisy looks down at her own hands in amazement and happily tells Jay that even her gloves have changed. Watching the equipment evolve right in front of her eyes immediately excites Jay. She realizes that this must be the visual representation of leveling up inside Infinite Ya Terrarium Adventure. Her excitement grows even further as she enthusiastically cheers Daisy on. After calming down slightly, Jay begins thinking seriously about the future. If she wants to continue buying nutrient fruits separately, she will probably need to purchase them from other druids. Otherwise, every time she wants nutrients, she would have to keep pulling from the orchard's gacha system, which could easily become a complete disaster. At that moment, the guide who has been quietly standing nearby politely clears his throat and asks whether he may speak. His sudden interruption startles Jay, causing her to jump in surprise before complaining that he nearly scared her. The guide apologizes before confirming that her assumption is correct. Druids regularly trade nutrient fruits among themselves at the marketplace. He immediately hands Jay a detailed map showing both the shopping district and the market where druids frequently gather. Jay gratefully accepts the map and thinks that she will absolutely make sure Daisy never lacks nutrients. With the endless supply of diamonds available through the Infinite Ya app, she is determined to support Daisy's growth as much as possible. Not long afterward, Jay, Daisy, the Elder Flower Dryad, and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad arrive at the bustling marketplace. While Jay studies the map to decide where to go first, a man suddenly calls out to her from one corner of the street. She turns around to find him holding a strange fruit in his hand. The man compliments her by saying that her dryads are on an entirely different level compared to every other dryad he has seen. Such outstanding dryads deserve equally outstanding care. He then raises the fruit in his hand and asks whether she would like to take a look at it. The instant Jay recognizes what he is holding, she interrupts him without hesitation. "I'll take it." The man blinks in confusion. Jay immediately asks whether it is a nutrient fruit. The man confirms that it is. Without wasting another second, Jay announces that she will buy every nutrient fruit he has. She offers 300 diamonds for each fruit and even raises the price to 500 diamonds per fruit if someone has more than 3 to sell. The moment those words leave her mouth, everyone nearby freezes before excitement spreads through the marketplace. One after another, druids begin gathering around her, eager to sell their nutrient fruits at such an unbelievable price. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately steps in front of Jay and raises his enormous shield to keep the increasingly excited crowd from rushing toward her. Watching the situation spiral out of control leaves Jay flustered. She hurriedly tells everyone to calm down because she intends to buy every fruit, but they must line up and sell them one person at a time. As the crowd slowly begins forming a queue, Jay suddenly realizes another problem. She has no idea how to count out hundreds of diamonds efficiently. If she simply shakes her phone like before, the gnomes inside the Infinite Ya app will probably dump an uncontrollable mountain of diamonds onto the street. Curious, she opens the app. Immediately, the familiar gnomes begin shouting all at once. "Master! Do you finally need diamonds? Master! We've been so bored because you haven't visited us. Master! Please hurry and take the diamonds." Their endless yelling quickly gives Jay a headache. She wonders how she is supposed to withdraw diamonds in neat groups of 100 instead of dumping thousands everywhere. Just then, the merchant politely reminds her that he is selling one nutrient fruit for exactly 300 diamonds. Jay looks back toward her phone. At that exact moment, she notices a cart icon displayed on the screen with the number 300 clearly written on it. Her eyes immediately widen with realization. It turns out the Infinite Ya app has a convenient payment feature all along, allowing her to withdraw the exact number of diamonds she needs without creating another mountain of treasure. The merchant happily confirms that he has received exactly 300 diamonds. He thanks Jay for making such a generous deal before quickly running away with a huge smile on his face. Watching him disappear into the crowd, Jay cannot help thinking that he is probably rushing off to try his luck at the orchard gacha once again. She lowers her eyes toward the Infinite Dia app and notices something interesting. More diamonds continue filling the cart automatically. Rather than creating new carts every time, the gnomes simply keep piling more diamonds into the same one. However, they are filling it at such an unbelievable speed that the cart itself can barely keep up. Jay realizes that the entire payment process is surprisingly smooth and much more convenient than she originally expected. Looking at the nutrient fruits she has purchased, she decides that most of them will naturally be given to Daisy. At the same time, she plans to give one fruit each to the Elderflower Dryad and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad as well. The three Dryads begin eating the nutrient fruits one after another. After finishing an unusually large number of them, Daisy quietly walks toward Jay and gently grabs the edge of her coat. "Miss Druid." Jay immediately looks down and gently asks what is wrong. With a slightly embarrassed expression, Daisy softly admits that she is full. Jay blinks in surprise before asking whether she really cannot eat anymore. She remembers how much food Daisy needed back at the restaurant just to satisfy her hunger. For this reason, she had assumed Daisy would continue eating without any problems. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad then steps forward and calmly explains the situation. He tells Jay that Daisy has currently reached the growth limit that Jay's soul can support. Although it would certainly be beneficial if Daisy could consume more nutrients, Jay's current soul capacity is still too small to allow further growth. The explanation immediately makes Jay realize the real problem. It is not Daisy's appetite. It is her own level. She sadly thinks that she is nothing more than a complete beginner who only wanted to return some of her endless diamonds back to society, yet her own weakness has become everyone's limitation. Unable to help herself, she begins pouting while tears almost form in her eyes. After calming herself down, determination quickly replaces disappointment. She concludes that the solution is simple. Battles, monster hunting, experience points, leveling up. She imagines herself fighting monsters alongside all three Dryads while becoming stronger little by little. Seeing Jay become so motivated, the Velvet Mesquite Dryad gently places a hand on her shoulder. He reminds her that the road ahead will be a very long journey. Before rushing into dangerous battles, they should first prepare properly. They still need water, food, potions, and proper equipment for Jay herself. Since every Dryad is directly connected to Jay's soul, any improvement in Jay's own abilities will naturally strengthen them as well. Listening to that explanation makes Jay realize that the relationship works both ways. Not only does she benefit from having powerful Dryads, but the Dryads themselves also become stronger whenever their master improves. She looks down at the dirty coat she has been wearing ever since arriving in the world of Infinite Dia, Terrarium Adventure. There is no way she can continue traveling while looking like a complete beginner forever. Smiling confidently, she decides that it is finally time to throw away this shabby newcomer appearance and buy proper adventuring equipment. The following morning, the four of them walk through the crowded shopping district. Daisy happily explains that this is the town's main commercial street. Jay thanks her while looking around at the bustling marketplace. Since the sun has already risen, the streets are packed with shoppers and adventurers. Suddenly, the Elderflower Dryad excitedly points his lance toward one of the nearby shops. His sparkling eyes clearly reveal that something has already caught his attention. Jay notices how excited he looks but suggests that they should first explore the area before deciding what to buy. Before anyone can continue walking, a loud announcement echoes across the shopping district. A gigantic bear statue holding a colorful banner begins advertising a special event through a magical loudspeaker. The announcement explains that this month's limited special grade accessory is a ruby ring, an item that can only be obtained through a lucky draw during the town's 26th trading festival. It also encourages every druid to present their beloved Dryads with the finest gifts possible. The moment Jay hears the words limited and special grade, her gamer instincts immediately activate. Without thinking twice, she loudly declares that she will buy it regardless of the price. The bear politely apologizes and explains that the ring is unfortunately not for sale. Instead, it can only be won through a lucky draw. Jay immediately changes her question and asks where she can purchase the lottery tickets. The bear explains that tickets are given away whenever customers make purchases at stores decorated with golden ribbons. Every participating shop also distributes free tickets to customers. After explaining the rules, the bear hands Jay her very first lottery ticket. The instant she receives it, Jay immediately begins calculating. If buying items earns tickets, then collecting a huge number of tickets should greatly increase her chances of winning the special grade ruby ring. Meanwhile, the elder flower dryad continues staring at the ring displayed inside its elegant glass case. Jay curiously asks whether he likes rubies. She honestly did not expect him to be interested in jewelry. Before the elder flower dryad can answer, the velvet mesquite dryad explains that it is not simply an ordinary gemstone. Ruby represents the birthstone of July. Dryads receive powerful combat bonuses depending on the blooming season of their mother plants. Birthstones strengthen those seasonal effects even further. Jay immediately remembers the information she previously saw on the stone plate. Both Daisy and the Velvet Mesquite Dryad receive combat bonuses during April. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad continues explaining that those dates correspond to the first blooming season of each dryad's mother plant. During that period, their natural abilities become significantly stronger. In the Elder Flower Dryad's case, his strongest season falls between June and July. For this reason, the ruby ring is particularly valuable to him. Jay immediately understands. If the Elder Flower Dryad wears that special grade ruby ring during July, his combat abilities will become even stronger. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad nods and confirms that this is exactly how it works. Since the ring is a special grade artifact, it allows the birthstone's magical properties to reach their maximum potential. Jay clenches her fist with renewed determination. Now she absolutely has to collect even more lottery tickets. Turning toward the Elder Flower Dryad, she jokingly tells him that she will leave him behind if he keeps staring at the display instead of helping. Then she reminds everyone that buying proper equipment comes first. As they continue shopping, Jay stops in front of an armor shop. Looking at the displayed equipment, she briefly wonders whether she should simply wear heavy armor like the Velvet Mesquite Dryad. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately shakes his head. He gently points out that Jay's current physical strength is far too low for heavy equipment. If she tried wearing a full suit of armor, the helmet alone might break her neck. Hearing such an honest assessment leaves Jay completely deflated. She quietly admits to herself that someone who never exercises and barely has any muscle cannot realistically expect to wear massive armor. Walking up to the shopkeeper, she politely asks whether there is a beginner equipment set designed specifically for new adventurers. If possible, she would also like equipment with useful effects. The shopkeeper smiles before leading her toward a simple starter set. The moment Jay sees it, disappointment immediately appears on her face. The equipment looks unbelievably plain. She cannot help thinking that every RPG seems determined to make beginner equipment look embarrassingly unattractive. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad carefully examines the set before commenting that it actually appears lightweight, practical, and well-designed. It covers all of Jay's vital areas without becoming unnecessarily heavy. In his opinion, it suits someone as physically fragile as Jay perfectly. After thinking it over for a while, Jay reluctantly agrees. She decides to at least purchase the protective robe that comes with the set. After changing into her new outfit, she is pleasantly surprised to discover that the entire purchase only costs 150 diamonds. Although she absolutely refuses to wear the embarrassing beginner headband across her forehead, she cleverly ties it around her hair instead. Looking at herself afterward, she smiles. She finally resembles a genuine RPG adventurer preparing to leave town for her very first quest. Even so, she wishes there were some kind of system notification telling her exactly how much her stats have increased. Once they leave the armor shop, Jay checks her pocket and counts the lottery tickets she has collected. She currently has only 6. That is nowhere near enough. They need many more. The Elder Flower Dryad suddenly points his lance toward another large building. It is the Artifact Workshop. Jay immediately recognizes it as the place where she can purchase furniture and decorations for her terrarium artifact. Without hesitation, she decides that they are definitely going inside. The moment they enter, Jay is amazed by its enormous interior. Despite its impressive size, very few customers are browsing inside. She wonders whether adventurers simply do not prioritize terrarium decorations, or whether everything sold here is extremely expensive. The workshop itself is divided into different sections representing various habitats. There is a natural field, a normal field, a desert field, a swamp field, and even a river field. While looking around, Jay notices that every customer is carrying a small wooden box. Curiously, she picks one up and realizes that it functions like a shopping basket. She quietly opens the Infinite Dia app, withdraws a generous amount of diamonds, and places them inside 3 separate baskets. Handing one basket to Daisy, another to the Elder Flower Dryad, and the last one to the Velvet Mesquite Dryad. She tells them that if they truly want something, they should simply buy it using those diamonds. She assures them that she will handle her own shopping separately. The Velvet Mesquite Dryad immediately says that he intends to stay beside Master Jay. However, Jay gently refuses. Instead, she tells him to accompany the Elderflower Dryad while she takes care of something else on her own. After waving goodbye to the three Dryads, Jay quietly turns toward a section labeled Random Boxes. The mysterious corner instantly captures her full attention, making her wonder what kinds of treasures might be hidden inside. After spending quite some time inside the artifact workshop, Jay realizes that ever since she enters the world of Infinitia, the thing that excites her the most is still the gacha system. As she carefully studies the display filled with random boxes, she notices a list showing the possible rewards and their incredibly low drop rates. Some of the rarest decorations have only a 0.1% probability of appearing. Looking through the list, she is shocked to discover that she can even obtain an entire house. One particular reward catches her attention, a beautiful merry house. Nearby, she also spots elegant fountains, temples, statues, and many luxurious decorations that would look perfect inside her terrarium adventure artifact. The moment she imagines how excited the Elderflower Dryad and Velvet Mesquite would become after seeing those decorations, she immediately makes up her mind. Without any hesitation, she announces that she is going to buy every random box lined up from one end of the shelf to the other. She confidently declares that she will keep opening boxes until the item she wants finally appears. The shopkeeper looks at her with concern and reminds her that excessive gambling is unhealthy for a person's mental well-being. Jay immediately argues back, saying that if anyone should be giving mental health advice, it certainly should not be a gacha system in the first place. After purchasing the maximum amount allowed, she realizes that even with unlimited diamonds, the game still limits players. She is only allowed to buy 200 random boxes. Although she cannot continue opening them forever, she notices that she has also collected a huge number of lucky draw tickets in the process. Thinking that the tickets are a nice bonus, she decides to begin opening the boxes. The very first box contains nothing more than a simple wooden fence with an 80% drop rate. Jay immediately realizes that it is one of those filler items every gacha game uses to manipulate probabilities and make the rare rewards seem even rarer. She continues opening more boxes one after another. The next rewards are nothing but another fence, then a white fence. After that comes an iron fence, then a golden fence. Seeing the golden fence, she briefly thinks that perhaps the Elderflower Dryad would like it. Unfortunately, the next reward is another fence made of stone, then another one covered with thorns. After that comes an old dried flower fence. Looking at the growing mountain of fences surrounding her, Jay can no longer hide her disappointment. She complains that every single box contains another fence. She jokingly says that she might as well collect every fence in existence since the game clearly refuses to give her anything else. The nearby players watch her miserable luck and begin whispering among themselves. Some pity her, while others jokingly remark that she has practically become a shareholder of fence companies. Jay can only stare blankly at the endless collection of fences while wondering whether she accidentally bought fence boxes instead of random boxes. Just then, Daisy arrives beside her. She notices that the Elderflower Dryad's shopping basket is completely empty. The Elderflower Dryad immediately stretches out the empty basket toward Jay, silently asking for more diamonds. Jay glances toward Daisy and notices that unlike him, Daisy still has plenty of diamonds remaining inside her basket. However, Daisy is secretly hiding something behind her back, making Jay suspect that she has already bought something without telling anyone. Turning toward the Elderflower Dryad, Jay says that he arrives at exactly the right moment. She asks him to use the blessing that increases her luck. The Elderflower Dryad looks utterly speechless before asking why she wants to waste such an ability. Jay quickly explains that these random boxes only keep giving her fences. She desperately wants the fountain and the beautiful house displayed on the reward list. The Elderflower Dryad becomes even more annoyed and asks whether she really intends to waste his valuable luck buff on something so trivial. Jay immediately points at him and reminds him that he was the one who wanted a fountain, a statue, and luxurious decorations for his habitat. There is even a temple available inside the random boxes, so she claims that she is actually doing this for his sake. Deep inside, however, she admits that she is obviously doing it for herself as well. The Elderflower Dryad suddenly becomes interested, but after checking his condition, he reluctantly explains that he cannot activate the blessing yet since he used it recently. His eyes still shine with excitement while imagining the decoration. Jay sighs in disappointment and thinks that although he is completely useless in this situation, simply looking at his handsome face somehow improves her mood. She then turns toward Daisy and hands her one of the unopened boxes. Jay gently tells her that she does not need to do anything special. She only has to open the box. Daisy nervously asks whether Jay would really feel better if she manages to obtain something valuable. Jay smiles warmly and assures her that she absolutely would. She only asks Daisy to avoid pulling another fence if possible before laughing and telling her not to feel pressured. Daisy carefully opens the box. Instead of another fence, a beautiful wine supporter appears inside. Jay excitedly picks it up and happily announces that it is finally something other than a fence. Daisy apologizes shyly, saying that it is still not the item Jay truly wanted. Before Jay can answer, the Elder Flower Dryad also decides to open one of the boxes. Inside, he discovers a rare purple mushroom that grants a vitality bonus to normal field dryads whenever it is placed inside the terrarium artifact. Jay smiles proudly and thinks that this result is exactly what she would expect from her lucky charm. Daisy watches both of them before quietly saying that she wants to try opening another box. She has unexpectedly become excited by the whole process. Jay notices something interesting. Although Daisy keeps obtaining useful items with very low probabilities, none of them are actually the decorations Jay is searching for. On the other hand, it amazes her that the Elder Flower Dryad keeps receiving objects perfectly suited for his own habitat. There are also numerous decorations designed specifically for normal field dryads. Meanwhile, Velvet Mesquite has absolutely no luck at all during the entire process. Oddly enough, that makes Jay feel a little better since she is no longer the only unlucky person. The Elder Flower Dryad notices one of Daisy's rewards and asks why she would need a fishing chair when none of Jay's current dryads even live in a river environment. Jay immediately stops him before another argument begins. She silently thinks that those two somehow always end up fighting, and in her opinion it is almost entirely the Elder Flower Dryad's fault. Fortunately, Daisy never loses her gentle personality despite his constant teasing. Daisy opens another random box. Suddenly Jay's eyes widen. This time, the reward is exactly what she has been desperately searching for. It is the magnificent rainbow fountain. Unable to contain her excitement, Jay loudly praises Daisy and declares that she truly is the best. She proudly announces to everyone nearby that Daisy really is her lucky flower. The Elder Flower Dryad watches the celebration with obvious jealousy written across his face. Jay immediately places the fountain decoration against her terrarium bracelet, wondering whether that is the correct method. The decoration instantly disappears from her hand and materializes inside the artifact exactly where she imagined. Seeing the beautiful fountain standing proudly in the center of the territory fills her with excitement. She thinks decorating her terrarium is going to become one of her favorite activities. At that exact moment, the large bear announcer broadcasts another message throughout the shopping district. He announces that the lucky draw is about to begin and asks everyone holding tickets to gather at the center of town. Jay realizes it is already time. She secretly feels relieved that she managed to collect a few additional tickets by exchanging unwanted fence rewards with other players. As the group walks toward the gathering place, Jay notices that Velvet Mesquite is still wearing his heavy armor. She asks whether it is uncomfortable for him and suggests that he could return to the artifact for a while. He calmly replies that he is perfectly fine, although if Jay is worried, he can simply remove the armor. Jay then realizes that the dryads apparently possess something similar to a wardrobe system that allows them to store equipment while keeping their weapons ready. She quietly becomes excited while imagining all the different outfits she might eventually buy for them. Soon everyone gathers around the stage. The bear announcer begins revealing the lucky draw prizes. 5th place winners receive potions. 4th place winners receive emergency travel ration. 3rd place winners receive special nutritional food. Jay quietly realizes that she has already purchased most of those rewards herself. Finally, the bear dramatically announces the grand prize. It is the limited special grade Wisdom Trophy Ruby Ring, an item that can only be obtained during the 26th Terrarium Adventure event. Jay silently prays that she will be the lucky winner. The bear loudly announces that the winning ticket number is 226. Jay immediately checks her own tickets. Her expression instantly collapses. She possesses ticket 225. She also has 227. But somehow she is missing 226. She can hardly believe her terrible luck and silently curses the situation. For a brief moment she even considers buying the winning ticket from whoever possesses it by offering thousands of diamonds. Just then Daisy quietly approaches her. She gently says that she received a ticket earlier from the artifact workshop and believes its number is 226. Everyone immediately turns toward Daisy. The bear continues calling for ticket number 226, unaware that the winner is standing quietly in the crowd. Jay excitedly grabs Daisy's hand and proudly shouts that her precious little lucky flower has the winning ticket. She practically drags Daisy toward the stage. The bear smiles warmly before presenting them with an elegant case containing the special ruby ring. Jay accepts the prize before immediately turning around and hugging Daisy tightly. With overwhelming happiness, she tells Daisy that meeting her truly is the luckiest thing that has happened to her. Daisy smiles brightly, looking happier than ever after hearing those heartfelt words. Just then, the elderflower dryad lightly taps Jay on the shoulder. He reminds her not to become too carried away. Jay suddenly remembers that although Daisy won the ring, its effects are actually most beneficial for the elderflower dryad. Looking at the sparkling ring resting inside its case, she quietly wonders what the best decision would be, especially now that the elderflower dryad is already showing obvious signs of jealousy. The bear suddenly stops Jay before she can admire the newly won ring and tells her to wait a moment. He reaches beneath the counter and hands her another elegant box. Curious, Jay asks what it is. The bear explains that it is a special collection case for the Wisdom Ruby accessory set. He further explains that the ruby ring she has just received is only one part of the complete collection. If she manages to obtain the remaining 2 matching accessories, she will be able to combine all 3 pieces into the legendary Wisdom Ruby Tiara, an item whose performance surpasses every individual accessory in the set. He proudly adds that no player has ever succeeded in completing the collection. Jay's eyes immediately sparkle with excitement. She eagerly asks whether the remaining accessories must also be obtained through lucky draws. The bear shakes his head and explains that only the ruby ring comes from the lucky draw. The remaining accessory pieces must be earned through different methods. Hearing that answer makes Jay even more excited. She immediately thinks that this gives off complete RPG completionist vibes. She absolutely loves collecting full equipment sets, and it almost feels as though the developers specifically designed the game for people exactly like her. She happily concludes that the Wisdom Ruby Tiara must be the true endgame reward of the collection, making it even more desirable. She quietly thinks that she has already chosen the path of spending unlimited diamonds, so naturally there must also be countless hidden collection events waiting for her. Every discovery seems to increase the excitement of the adventure. Unable to wait any longer, she carefully opens the ring case. Inside rests an incredibly beautiful ruby ring. The crimson gemstone shines brilliantly under the light. Jay carefully lifts it from the box and immediately notices how surprisingly cold it feels against her fingers. The chilly sensation almost reminds her of holding a piece of ice. Looking at the tiny ring, she reaches for Daisy's hand and gently tries placing it on one of her fingers. Unfortunately, the ring is slightly too large for Daisy. The elderflower dryad immediately complains that the ring belongs to him. Daisy quietly tells Jay that she does not actually need the ring anyway. She gently explains that the combat bonus provided by the ruby corresponds to months that do not match her own blooming season. Since her bonuses occur during a completely different period, the ring would not benefit her very much. Jay silently agrees. She thinks that although the ring is an extremely valuable special grade accessory, using it merely as decoration would be a complete waste. Equipment like this should always be given to the dryad who can use its abilities to their fullest potential. Turning toward the elderflower dryad, Jay smiles before reminding him that Daisy personally picked the fruit that summoned him. Now Daisy has also won him a priceless special accessory. She tells him that instead of constantly calling Daisy a child and picking fights with her, he should finally start treating her kindly. Although Jay could simply hand the ring to him herself, she deliberately decides not to. Deep down, she believes those two desperately need an opportunity to repair their relationship. Otherwise, they will continue arguing forever. She wants the elderflower dryad to understand that it is Daisy who earned this reward for him. Daisy gently smiles before extending the ring toward him. She softly asks whether he wants it. Jay, the elderflower dryad, and Velvet Mesquite all stare at Daisy in surprise. Looking at the scene, Velvet Mesquite calmly comments that the situation strangely reminds him of Master Jay herself. He explains that Daisy holding the sparkling ring in front of the elderflower dryad looks almost identical to Jay tempting him with endless diamonds. Jay immediately remembers all the times she manipulated the elderflower dryad using diamonds and silently cries inside. She jokingly wonders what exactly Daisy learned from watching her. However, her expression soon softens. She remembers everything that has happened since arriving in this world. The differences in rank among dryads clearly affect their confidence and self-esteem. Back at the orchard, simply seeing the existence of the Elder Flower Dryad and Velvet Mesquite was enough to discourage many lower-ranked dryads. If the Elder Flower Dryad now has to beg Daisy for the ring, it will undoubtedly wound his pride more than anything else. Jay quietly prepares herself for another argument. Even Velvet Mesquite folds his arms and calmly watches, apparently expecting a fight to break out as well. Jay teasingly warns the Elder Flower Dryad that since the ring is a special grade item, Daisy might simply decide not to give it to him if he keeps acting rudely. Watching Daisy calmly holding the ring with complete confidence, Jay cannot help smiling. She remembers how timid Daisy looked when they first met. Now Daisy stands proudly without showing even the slightest hesitation. Jay feels incredibly proud. She realizes that Daisy will never again become discouraged so easily, no matter where she goes. After remaining silent for a few seconds, the Elder Flower Dryad suddenly lets out a deep sigh. To everyone's complete surprise, he slowly kneels down before Daisy. He politely extends his hand and, with sparkling eyes full of expectation, gently asks her to please give him the ring. Jay completely freezes. For a brief second, the entire situation looks less like someone asking for an accessory and more like a marriage proposal. Daisy giggles before smiling warmly. She says that since she is as generous as Miss Druid, she will end the matter there. She happily places the ring into his hand. The Elder Flower Dryad immediately brightens up. His eyes sparkle with excitement as he happily stands back up. Watching the two of them, Jay quietly admits to herself that this peaceful atmosphere probably will not last forever. Even so, she feels genuinely relieved that they are finally beginning to get along. Satisfied with everything they have accomplished, Jay happily announces that they now have all the supplies they need. She excitedly declares that it is finally time to start leveling up. Before anyone can move, an unfamiliar voice suddenly interrupts them. Jay startles in surprise. Velvet Mesquite calmly remarks that he noticed the stranger earlier but chose not to interfere since the old man did not appear dangerous. Standing nearby is an elderly man with a long beard. He politely asks whether Miss Druid is finally prepared to begin a true adventure. Jay immediately studies his appearance. The old man looks exactly like one of those classic NPCs that always hand players their very first main quest. Realizing this, Jay becomes incredibly excited. She enthusiastically asks what she can possibly help him with. Inside, she thinks that he has come to exactly the right person. Her character preparation is complete, she has assembled her party, and she has purchased all the essential equipment. The old man quietly examines her before commenting that her soul has not yet become particularly strong. Jay's excitement instantly drops. She wonders whether her level is still too low to unlock the main quest. For a brief moment she considers whether she should leave and gain more experience first. However, she quickly convinces herself that the first main quest in most RPGs is usually easy. Crossing her arms confidently, she tells the old man to look again. Even if her own level is still lacking, her dryads are magnificent. She proudly gestures toward Velvet Mesquite beside her. The old man nods thoughtfully before admitting that the favor he wishes to ask is actually quite dangerous. He hands Jay an ancient scroll. Immediately, Jay becomes even more excited. High risk usually means high reward. The old man tells her to open it. Before Jay can even react, Velvet Mesquite respectfully opens the scroll for her. She carefully looks over its contents. Instead of ordinary text, she finds a detailed map. It resembles an enormous ant colony filled with countless branching paths. A gigantic tree stands at the center. Jay quietly assumes it must represent the World Tree. The old man points toward one location and explains that it represents the 26th terrarium of the World Tree, the very place where they are currently standing. Jay immediately realizes that the scroll functions as the world's map. The old man then points toward another location. He explains that it represents the 28th terrarium. His expression becomes serious. He explains that the entire terrarium was recently consumed by an enormous fire. According to him, such a disaster should have been impossible. The branches of the World Tree naturally protect every terrarium from ordinary flames. The terrariums closest to the World Tree receive the strongest protection because the branches there possess the greatest power. Even if a fire somehow became unusually strong, it still should never have been capable of destroying the 28th terrarium. If anything, the neighboring terrariums should have resisted the flames together. Jay silently imagines all the druids and dryads who must have lived there. Velvet Mesquite also comments that such an event is truly unbelievable while the power of the World Tree remains intact. The old man agrees. For this reason, every terrarium numbered within the 20s has been placed on the highest state of alert. No one knows whether they are truly safe anymore. He then reveals the task he wishes to entrust to Jay. He asks her to investigate the true cause behind the destruction. If she manages to uncover the mystery and safely return, they can discuss an appropriate reward afterward. The old man quietly reveals that many druids have already accepted this investigation before her. However, not a single one has ever returned. Jay's eyes widen in complete shock. She silently repeats his words inside her mind. Not one person came back alive. The quest suddenly sounds far more dangerous than she originally imagined. She begins wondering whether boss monsters are about to appear this early in the game. Considering her current level, she starts questioning whether accepting the quest is really a wise decision. Ignoring her hesitation, the old man calmly assumes that she has accepted the mission. He begins walking away. Jay hurriedly examines the rewards section of the scroll. Instead of showing any prize, it simply displays the word undefined. She immediately calls after the old man, begging him to at least reveal some clue about the reward before leaving. What if the reward turns out to be completely useless after risking her life? Without turning around, the old man quietly replies that the butterflies which visited the orchard have not yet flown away. He simply says that they should catch them and place them inside the collection bottle. After saying those mysterious words, he continues walking away. Jay remains standing there in complete confusion. She repeatedly wonders what on earth that statement is supposed to mean. Was it some kind of hidden code? Perhaps it was a poetic hint. Or maybe it refers to something much deeper. No matter how much she thinks about it, she cannot understand why the conversation suddenly turns into collecting insects.